Introduction. Fanfiction of Game of Thrones. He is the greatest deceiver in the Seven Kingdoms. He is the revered Pope of the Seven. He is the hidden mastermind behind the turmoil in the Seven Kingdoms. Chapter 1. Arrival in Westeros. In the year 297 of Aegon's calendar, on a rainy morning in the stormlands at Griffin's Roost, Rhoda was abruptly awakened by a thunderclap, slowly opened his eyes, and was horrified by the scene before him, leaping to a sitting position and scanning his surroundings. Before him stood a stone fortress, or rather a castle. The thick stone walls of the hall were adorned with 20 iron candle holders, yet only 8 held torches, and none were lit. Flickering light emanated from 2 thick candles swaying gently. Rhoda could hear the chilling sound of cold rain battering the walls and dripping from the leaky roof, reminiscent of a horror film. This was no dream. Rhoda felt a wave of fear wash over him as he realized his body had gone weak since awakening. As a sophomore in the 21st century, he certainly did not believe in ghosts or deities, but as a young man well-versed in various internet novels, he had his doubts. "At least I'm not a woman," he mused, stroking the callous skin of his hand and feeling the coarse red beard on his chin, confirming that he had indeed transmigrated. He sniffed his body. There was no foul odor, indicating he had bathed, and a faint floral scent lingered. He nodded in satisfaction, realizing that the original body belonged to a nobleman. God? System? Template? Grandpa? Mastermind? Rhoda attempted to activate his golden finger, but it was evident that nothing happened. What the hell? In the Middle Ages, a misstep could lead to death. He swallowed nervously and glanced at the bedside, where a sword lay across the nightstand, weighed down by several books. Surveying the room, he noticed armor, a bronze mirror, and a few flamboyant outfits. He casually picked up 3 books to discern the historical context of his current location. He seized a volume with a red cover titled The Defenders of the Wall, authored by Harmon. Even the English know about the Great Wall of China? Is this during the First Industrial Revolution? Or perhaps Zheng? He reached England. He opened the first page and began to read. The liberator Brandon Stark allied with the king beyond the wall, Jorman, to end the 13-year reign of the Night King and his whites. Stark? Night King? Rhoda hastily retrieved the other 2 tomes, The Iron Bank and The Origins of Bravos, and the genealogy and history of the major nobles of the Seven Kingdoms, flipping through their pages. Free Trade Federation? Lannisters? Baratheons? Rhoda exclaimed incredulously to himself. Good heavens! A Game of Thrones? A Song of Ice and Fire? He looked up at the 2 banners of the Lion and Griffin hanging by the window and continued to search. In the genealogy and history of the major nobles of the Seven Kingdoms, he found the information he sought. The original owner was Roland Connington. His family was indeed the Clintons of Griffin's Roost, a historically significant noble house from the Stormlands. Since John Connington was appointed hand of the king by the Mad King Ares II, the Connington family had been a wealthy noble house. John Connington took charge during the War of Usurpation, suppressing Robert Baratheon, but was defeated at the Battle of the Bells. Consequently, the Mad King stripped him of his title and lands, exiling him. His cousin, Ronald Connington deceased, the original's father, joined the rebels during the ensuing conflict. After Robert's coronation, he returned Griffin's Roost to the Connington family, but stripped them of their title and most of their lands, redistributing them to supporters more loyal to himself. Thus, their family status was demoted from a complete noble house to that of a knightly family after the War of Usurpation. The Stormlands, where Griffin's Roost is located, is one of the vassal regions in the 7 Kingdoms of Westeros. Before the last Storm King perished during the Conquest War, it had been an independent kingdom ruled by the Storm Kings. The Stormlands are currently governed by House Baratheon of Storm's End, named for the relentless storms and fierce winds that plague the area throughout the year. The Connington family swore fealty to Storm's End. Their territory is fortified Griffin's Roost, whose heraldry features a pair of opposing griffins, one red and one white, against a background split in half, one side white and the other red. Their family motto is not mentioned in the texts, but their age-old battle cry is "Long live the Griffin." Long live the Griffin. Just as Roland was preparing to glean more useful information from the books, a gentle knock sounded at the door. From this point on, the protagonist will be referred to as Roland Connington. Lord Roland, enter. An elderly man pushed the door open, surprised to see Roland surrounded by books. Lord Roland, breakfast is ready. He appeared to be the steward, albeit thin and unattractive, Roland thought. His face and chin were obscured by rough gray stubble, flecked with white. He spoke with a thick, heavy-lipped mouth, his words barely audible, punctuated by a cough that suggested he did not have long to live. Roland nodded and leaned forward. Bring me a glass of water, he instructed, and sort the letters sent from King's Landing by the Ravens over the past 3 years, delivering all of them to the study. Do you understand? The steward complied. He then summoned 2 maids to assist Roland in dressing and grooming. Looking at his reflection, Roland felt disheveled with his red beard and instructed the maids to shave him, feeling much more refreshed afterward. Don't I look handsome? Roland teased. Lead me to the dining hall, pretty maid. The maid nodded, and Roland followed her, glancing around the castle, which was dark and damp, devoid of any signs of life, silent and eerie. He mused that lingering here too long might drive one mad without a phone or computer. How can a modern college student survive? This castle was unlike the grand ones filled with paintings, antiques, and murals he had imagined. He could easily believe it had been haunted. Damn, brother, why did you take so long? I'm starving. A girl complained as she approached Roland upon his entrance into the dining hall. Roland felt a twinge of anxiety, fearing the little girl might sense something amiss. He glanced sideways at a boy seated at the long table and ruffled the girl's hair. All right, let's eat. Fill your belly and warm your body. After taking his seat at the head of the table, Roland surveyed the spread before him. Soft bread, crab meat slathered in thick yellow butter, a yellowed fish soup, garlic, apples, a charred leg of lamb topped with cream, and 2 large bottles of wine that the girl was drinking. His appetite vanished upon seeing this dismal feast. Raymond, the steward said you wanted to speak with me? Roland asked, holding the soft bread while looking at him. The 2 boys stiffened, lowering their utensils and bowing their heads. What's wrong? Roland inquired. Aren't we family? You can tell me anything. Brother, I want to go outside and play. Raymond's voice grew softer as he spoke. I'm going crazy in this castle. My martial skills can't even get 2 or 3 people in, and aren't there guards? You needn't worry about my head ending up on Stannis' table. Chapter 2. Little wealth through diligence, great wealth through enemies. Stannis? Stannis Baratheon? Roland asked. Why would he want her head? Isn't he serious and just? Would he truly harm children like you? Raymond and Eleanor assumed Roland was speaking ironically, unaware that their brother had changed. Serious and just? My dear brother, he harbors grievances even against the 7 gods. What do you expect? Years ago, when I was born, my father was compelled to consume flesh and drink wine before the gates of Wind's Rest, forcing him into a state of desperation. Of course, he despises us otherwise. Would he clasp our father's hand and say, Brother, well done, you've worked hard? The moment someone presents our heads upon his table, he would not hesitate to reward that brave warrior with a pouch of golden dragons, Raymond lamented. And our so-called heroic king merely turns a blind eye for those mercenaries who thrive on bloodshed. The prospect of us, the fat meat, is simply irresistible. Roland pieced together the narrative, understanding that it pertained to the early siege of Wind's Rest during the War of Usurpation. The conflict arose when Robert Baratheon, the ruler of the Stormlands, led most of his forces into battle, leaving Stannis with a small contingent to defend Wind's Rest. Subsequently, Robert was defeated by the renowned commander Renly Tarly, forcing him to retreat from the Stormlands and engage in combat with Roland's distant uncle, Jon Clinton, in the Riverlands. Meanwhile, the forces of House Tyrell laid siege to Wind's Rest, targeting Stannis' position. Mace Tyrell commanded the armies of the Reach, coordinating a joint land and naval blockade with the fleet from Dragonstone, effectively severing the supply lines of Shipbreaker Bay. The siege persisted for nearly a year, during which the defenders, driven to desperation, resorted to slaughtering horses and consuming pets, even to the extent of resorting to cannibalism among their fallen comrades. Ultimately, following the Battle of the Trident and the fall of King's Landing, Eddard Stark of House Stark marched south, lifting the siege of Wind's Rest. Stannis bore a deep resentment towards the 7 since the tragic demise of his parents when they attempted to return from across the narrow sea. Their ship sank in Shipbreaker Bay, resulting in their untimely deaths. From that fateful day, Stannis loathed the cruel gods who had stolen his parents, becoming increasingly morose. As for those who besieged Wind's Rest, he wished nothing less than their obliteration, despite the fact that the Mad King had perished and the Targaryen dynasty had crumbled. Nevertheless, the supporters of the crown remained formidable, and any reckoning would undoubtedly incite further turmoil. Thus, Robert's adoptive father, King Jon Arryn, managed to placate Stannis, leaving the matter of Wind's Rest unresolved. Yet, minor bounties still caused trouble for the lords who had participated in the siege. Raymond's fist clenched tighter as he grew increasingly agitated, ultimately unleashing a torrent of curses. He even suspected that his adoptive father had been dispatched by Stannis himself. Save your breath, brother. When the enemy arrives, your only option will be to flee. And there is nothing valiant about fleeing. Cursing the enemy from the safety of home will not cost you a hair. Focus on honing your martial skills, slay him with a single stroke, and witness him stiffen and soil himself far more gratifying than cursing from behind his back. I assure you, you shall have your chance. Of course, don't expect to venture out unless you can best me, Roland said, tearing off a piece of bread and chewing thoughtfully. Eleni, you as well. Dedicate yourself to mastering etiquette and embroidery, I assure you. You shall wed into a fine family. Really, by the 7, you finally agreed. I shall train at once, Raymond exclaimed, his complexion flushed as he dashed out. Eleni, on the other hand, lowered her head shyly, savoring her meal. She was indeed a beauty, her eyes a striking shade of blue, almost violet, and with her fair skin clad in purple velvet adorned with bronze buttons, her hair cascading over her shoulders. Roland, having crossed over without inheriting the memories of his former self, found it impossible to seamlessly integrate into this new life. Despite lacking the experience to discern virtue from vice, his familiarity with the narrative allowed him to easily identify the good from the bad, making it a simple task to select a suitor for Eleni with both good character and favorable conditions. Ideally, he would establish a mutually beneficial alliance or a defensive pact with whoever would court her. After their meal, a maid led Roland into the study, where one wall was lined with shelves and boxes filled with ancient scrolls and parchment. Golden sunlight streamed through a round window of wavy, patterned yellow glass. Opening the window, Roland inhaled deeply, finally able to breathe fresh air after feeling stifled within the castle. Below, the comings and goings of townsfolk, though humble compared to the bustling towns of his former life, were clean, orderly, and well-kept. The wide, straight streets, paved with stone, were a pleasure to navigate. The buildings, constructed of stone, posed little risk of fire. Most notably, there was no foul odor. Perhaps the height of the castle rendered such scents undetectable. Roland was thoroughly satisfied, even with minor imperfections. This was indeed a dreamlike beginning. As for Stanissa, a small fortune is earned by virtue, but a greater fortune is seized from the enemy. Roland settled into a chair, fiddling with the intricately carved wooden trinkets on the desk. Several bottles of red wine and a few volumes on languages, arithmetic, and history lay before him. The former occupant had been quite studious. He picked up the recent missives from King's Landing, glanced over them with a sigh, and turned to a sheet of paper, standing beneath the morning sun, reading word by word. The quill's small script was indeed challenge. After perusing several pages, none contained any useful information about King's Landing's prices or the latest entertainment from the moon. It seemed that peace reigned, regardless of whether Jon Arryn had met his demise at the hands of Peter Baelish or Eddard Stark had ascended to the throne. Such significant events were communicated to the lords of the 7 kingdoms via Raven. The plot had yet to unfold, Roland mused. Lord Roland, came a voice. Enter, he replied. Lord Roland, I hear from the steward that you sought me. How may I be of service? A stout soldier in polished silver armor entered, the sigil of the Griffin emblazoned on his chest. He possessed a shock of black hair and brown eyes. Save for the 4-centimeter scar marring his left cheek, he could be considered quite handsome. Service? 7 hells. Look at that. Roland rose, pointing at the 2 guards stationed at the door, nearly dozing off with their spears. Is this your idea of service? I expect you to bring me victory and gold, yet you seem only capable of bringing sorrow and the cries of the burnt. My lord, the soldier stammered, struggling to explain. What is your name, soldier? Roland interrupted. Gryn Storm, my lord, he replied, somewhat perplexed, but answered truthfully. We have approximately 7,000 men over 5 feet tall, though perhaps only 2,000 to 3,000 are truly combat-ready. Roland reclined back into his chair. Listen, Gryn Storm, we may be facing some trouble. In a few days, I will provide you with a training manual. Soldiers who persist will see their monthly pay raised to 1 golden dragon. Your task is to ensure those men cast aside those damned farming tools and gather at least 3,000 men within a week. Otherwise, you may as well return to the fields. Your will, Lord Roland. I do not know what troubles you face, but I shall shed the last drop of my blood to resolve what you deem troublesome. Gryn placed a hand on his sword and slowly exited the study. Chapter 3. Seizing opportunities amidst chaos. As Roland traversed through Corse, the Hall of Immortals, Shea, and the Land of Shadows, individuals endowed with extraordinary abilities experienced a simultaneous sense of foreboding. The prophetic sorcerers trembled in horror as they discerned that the future had become indescribable. shrouded beneath a veil of darkness that rendered all vision obscured. Various factions hastily dispatched additional personnel across the realms, hoping to unearth any valuable intelligence. Since his transformation into the current Roland, he had never ventured beyond the confines of his castle. It was indeed a source of irony that, as a lord of the land, his understanding of his own territory stemmed solely from his steward and maps. Emerging from his study, Roland addressed a dozing guard. "Hey, you two simpletons, awaken. Inform Green to assemble 2 squads of guards. I wish to survey the territory." The soldier, roused from his slumber, bowed his head and departed with haste upon receiving the command. Roland shook his head as he watched the soldier leave, reminding himself that patience was essential. After all, years of tranquility had likely rendered many soldiers unfamiliar with the sight of blood. "My Lord Roland," Green called as he approached. Come. It has been quite some time since I donned this armor. Please assist me." Roland fumbled with his armor, exclaiming in frustration, "Damn it, this contraption is suffocating me." "It serves to preserve your life in times of peril," Green replied earnestly. "Recently, a number of bandits have emerged in the Wind Fury Horn." "Bandits? I know how to wield a sword," Roland retorted. "Not quite, my lord. You have never even slain a chicken, let alone a man," Green silently countered. "When I was homeless, lost, and on the brink of death, it was you who sheltered me, allowing me to survive. In the presence of the new and old gods, I made a sacred vow at Eagle's Nest Fortress to repay your boundless kindness and grace, pledging to be your sword for eternity. Even when the Targaryens had dragons, they relied upon the Kingsguard for protection. True enough, but soon we shall be kneeling before a dragon-riding Targaryen with 2 breasts," Roland lamented, grasping the sword from his nightstand. "Come, I am intrigued by your reports of bandits in Wind Fury Horn. Share your insights with me as we travel." It was a warm afternoon, with the sun suspended high in the sky, casting brilliant rays of light and a perfectly balanced warmth. Shops, vendors, and taverns crowded beneath the stone walls of the castle. And beyond, the towers and domes of the city emerged, gilded in the sun's crimson glow. A porter pushed a cart laden with supplies, salt and flour, with the most conspicuous items being large barrels of wine, alongside seafood and bear pelts. Roland, akin to a young scion of privilege, sat astride his horse, meticulously surveying every corner of his domain. He observed the wares at the market stalls and the weapons and armor displayed at the blacksmith's forge. The Wind Fury Horn jutted from the Stormlands into the narrow sea, bordered to the north by Shipwreck Bay, to the south by the Dornish Sea, and facing the Isle of Isman across the waters. The peninsula boasted a rainy climate and fertile lands, with vast expanses claimed by rainforests. Despite the region's dampness, the soil remained exceedingly rich. Within the confines of the Eagle's Nest Fortress, all crops were to be replaced with potatoes and wheat. Roland commanded that you oversee this transition. Furthermore, he instructed you to dispatch individuals to the opposite shore of the narrow sea to procure a few slaves. We still possess several iron mines. Let them be utilized for that purpose. From now on, the trade of iron goods is strictly prohibited. The blacksmiths must dedicate their efforts to forging armor and swords. Your will is paramount." Greenstorm kicked the horse's belly and followed Roland, inquiring about the number of slaves needed. "As many as required. Ensure your men remain vigilant. I need slaves who can mine during peacetime and wield swords in battle, not those so emaciated they perish after a few steps. That I shall not accept." "I understand. I will convey your message. Tell me about that band of robbers. What else do they covet? Are they intending to assist the farmers in harvesting wheat?" Roland dismounted from his horse, disregarding decorum as he seated himself on the edge of the field. "How many are there, and what is the state of their weaponry?" "There is no time for a detailed assessment. Approximately 200 to 300, lightly armed. They were quite courteous while passing through our territory. It appears they are heading south." Green signaled to the guards behind him, dismounted, and leaned closer to Roland, whispering, "They do not seem to be of the Dorn folk." "Ah, so they are southerners." Roland jested. "It seems someone is about to receive a kick. We may profit from the ensuing chaos. Remember, do not kill. Seek out unfamiliar faces." Stonehelm City has long been governed by the Swen family, with the current ruler being the elderly Gullion Swen, who is over 60 years old. The Swen family boasts a rich history, reportedly tracing its roots back to the time of the Undul invasion. They wield considerable power as a significant lordship along the borderlands between Dorne and the Stormlands. Stonehelm City is situated beside a great river that flows into the Sea of Dorne, a source of considerable wealth and strength for them. Alongside the Clinton family, they are among the most influential nobles under House Baratheon in the Stormlands. Due to their location along the frontier, conflicts with Dorne or the Reach are perhaps inevitable. So, after a month of toil, You still do not know how many they are? Gullion Swen, without raising his gaze, rubbed the sheepskin parchment in his hands, covered by an exquisite bear fur blanket. This old man, with his white hair and shriveled skin, bore the weight of time, but his eyes remained sharp, filled with a mix of ferocity and wisdom. We have sealed off the foothills. They claim to be flower cultivators. Baron Swen shrugged nonchalantly. We launched a night raid, and they were utterly astonished. My soldiers and I sent many to their demise. Some even leapt from the mountainside. Bang, bang, bang. Baron Swen was robust, with a broad chest and muscular arms, his youthful features adorned with brown hair and small, dark eyes, exuding bravery and courtesy. How many of our men were lost? Gullion pushed the wine cup on the table. 27, Baron replied after taking a sip from his cup. I informed them that without sustenance, they would not survive long. If my reinforcements arrive, they will all perish. Clearly, they recognized the truth in my words and surrendered, laying down their weapons. What of the supplies? None were found, Baron said, fixing his gaze intently on Gullion. They claimed to have not pillaged any resources and were captured before they could act. None found. Gullion paced back and forth. 7 gods. That was the supply of the 13th ship. Could it possibly fly by itself? It seemed that they were divided into 2 factions, and it appeared that the group we had captured were mere scapegoats. Baron remarked, Shall I bring their heads for you to inspect? No. There were more pressing matters at hand. Gullion suddenly composed himself, extracting a small note from a book and handing it to Baron. Recently, that lad Clinton had been performing admirably. He had successfully promoted his salt, perfume, soap, and wine across the 7 kingdoms. The nobles adored him, and he amassed a fortune. He had formed a merchant guild, the Wind's Fury, which all except our nobles, yes, all, had joined, reaping substantial profits along the way. Chapter 4. The Griffin's Desire for Rose's 7 Layers of Hell. This is utterly insane, Baron exclaimed in a hushed roar as he gazed at the note. One cannot become so unrestrained with a mere taste of success. Does he still aspire to Wind's Rest? No, even if that were the case. It could not possibly be now. Gullion snatched the note from Baroness' hand and cast it into the hearth. The camaraderie between our 2 houses can be traced back to the invasion of the Undulls 6 millennia ago, when our ancestors united under the banner of House Durrandon. The Storm Kings. As long as he continues to perform well and bends the knee to him, wielding his sword for him, there should be no issue. It seems I must pen a letter of grievance to the Iron Throne and to Baelor Baratheon. The Iron Throne? Baratheon? Gullion detested that surname. In the past, he believed that perhaps several kings of Storm's End might differ, rallying many from Wind's Fury. Yet, after he drew his sword to aid Robert in claiming the Iron Throne, look at what he received. Merely a handful of farmland? He followed Robert from Wind's Rest to the Trident, and thence to King's Landing, bending the knee countless times and shouting long live the king, an innumerable number of times, all for that meager parcel of land? Treating the vassals of Wind's Fury as if they were mere toilet paper, kept pristine when needed and crumpled and discarded when not. As for why Wind's Fury was disfavored by the Baratheons, Gullion understood well. The nobles of Wind's Fury were tightly knit, making it difficult for outsiders to infiltrate. They operated as a distinct entity, existing outside the courts of King's Landing and Wind's Rest, often disregarding proclamations and contributing little labor. Prior to the landing of the Targaryens, the title of Storm King was held by the ancient kings of Storm's End. Legends tell that the first Storm King, Durin, constructed Wind's Rest, and his descendants became the ruling family of Storm's End, House Durrandon. The Storm King established a formidable kingdom, once extending its territories northward and at its zenith, even encompassing the Riverlands. Then, when Aegon Targaryen I and Aerys Baratheon, the ancestor of the Baratheons, took on the guardianship of Storm's End, Wind's Fury remained unchanged. At that time, many looked down upon that bastard of a Baratheon surname, believing that only Durrandon could lead them. They might have been subdued by dragons, but a bastard? Apologies, their loyalty was not so easily bought. Henceforth, Wind's Fury began to drift away from the Baratheons, and since 1200, many from Wind's Fury attempted dragon slaying, the most renowned being Byron Swan. In the realm of politics, only John Clinton, who grew up alongside the Targaryens, briefly ascended to the throne as a king's hand before being exiled across the narrow sea. Prior to this, the Stormlands had not witnessed anyone rise to even the status of a golden robe, and even now, their political involvement remains virtually non-existent. Thus, even if John Clinton were to confront Robert with sword in hand, Robert would still relinquish Griffin's Roost back to Clinton. Just as Stonehelm must bear the name of the Starks, Griffin's Roost must rightfully belong to the Clintons. If Robert's actions merely evoked disappointment, Stannis' actions incite resentment. The rainwood is a shared resource, a tacit understanding among many nobles of the stormlands. Numerous lesser nobles and commoners rely on its bounty. Stannis's arbitrary granting of land to the smuggler known as the Onion Knight encroaches upon everyone's livelihood, and thus one cannot fault those who might wish harm upon this knight. Fortunately, this fellow is perpetually in Stannis's shadow, rendering it impossible for him to meet a watery demise or suffer a broken leg. This lad is quite astute. The westward journey indeed holds promise. Gullion, returning to his chair, lamented that if only the Griffin had slain the stag at the Trident, the Targaryens would have thought twice before infringing upon our interests. Father, just as you were unaware of the Targaryen downfall, you could not foresee Robert's treatment of us. Your actions back then were justified. At least in my eyes, there was nothing amiss. Baron, seated across from Gullion, poured himself a glass of wine and confessed that he held a certain fondness for the rotund man on the Iron Throne. As for Stannis, is he not still languishing in King's Landing? The territory of the Onion Knight is quite insignificant and poses no real threat to us. Why does Roland harbor such a deep-seated desire to slay the stag? Certain doors, once opened, can lead to an ever-widening breach. Perhaps our houses are indifferent, but others were furious when they first heard the news. It seems young Clinton's ambitions extend far beyond mere trifles. Gullion informed Baron that even in the absence of dragons, we can still make our voices heard, and one must admit that Roland has chosen an opportune moment. The number of individuals who once aided Robert in the Stormlands now equal those who resent him. Many eagerly anticipate his downfall. So why must we escalate matters to such a degree? Do we truly need to raise a fuss over something so trivial? Trivial? I lost 13 ships worth of cargo. Gullion, feeling disheartened, looked at Baron and wished he possessed even half the ambition of young Clinton. Listen, whether the Griffin wishes to slay the stag is uncertain. But once a secret is known to a second party, it ceases to be a secret. Roland is probing me. One Betrothal sits upon the Iron Throne, and another resides at Griffin's Roost. Whom do you think he wishes to see perish? Ignoring Baron, Gullion continued. The letter also stated that assistance would be rendered in alleviating my troubles at the borders. Roland is rallying the lords of the Stormlands to wage war against the Tyrells, urging me to gather troops at Griffin's Roost. Behold, herein lies the issue. Even if I held a modicum of loyalty to the Baratheons, I would never venture to that accursed Griffin's Roost. Gullion raised his cup, gulping down a mouthful as he continued to grumble. Assist me? That serves only to benefit him. Robert cannot fault Roland for overstepping. His letter explicitly stated it was an invitation, and all parties are acting of their own accord. As my letter reaches King's Landing, do you believe that Jon Arryn will merely stand by and witness the ensuing chaos? Roland, merely riding around, would effortlessly attract followers to his cause. Sometimes, earning prestige is as simple as that, and in the Stormlands, such renown shines even more brilliantly than the sun itself. He can elevate others, resolve conflicts, and lead them to prosperity. The nobles would undoubtedly adore him for it. Baron feigned a smile, asking, are we truly to descend into madness alongside Clinton? If we do not attend, he continued, Roland will presume we still wish to sip from the teats of the stag. Can you imagine how he would deal with me? Damn it, Gullion cursed. You ought to land a few punches on his face when you see him. Chapter 5. The Council Meeting, Red Keep, King's Landing, King's Landing. The capital of the Seven Kingdoms is situated on the eastern coast of Westeros, home to the Red Keep and the Iron Throne. Destitute peasants have erected their shanties outside the city. The population density is staggering, yet the city is far dirtier and less appealing compared to others. The stench of refuse can be detected even beyond the city walls. The decor of the council chamber within the Red Keep is extravagantly opulent. The floors are adorned with rich carpets rather than rushes. In one corner stands a wooden screen from the Summer Isles, intricately carved with a myriad of vividly colored and lifelike exotic creatures. On either side of the door are statues of the Valyrian Sphinx, their rounded garnet eyes gleaming with vitality against the backdrop of black marble. Jon Arryn, with broad shoulders and age 72, has lost half of his teeth, his blue eyes and golden hair framing a hawkish nose. Upon entering the chamber, he found all 5 ministers present. The master of ships, Stannis Baratheon, sat deep in thought, his broad shoulders and sturdy limbs suggesting strength, his face taut and weathered from years of sun exposure, as tough as iron. Despite being under 35, he had but a fringe of black hair, resembling a shadowy crown encircling his ears. His beard was neatly trimmed, casting a bluish shadow over his square jaw and hollow cheeks. Beneath his thick brows, his eyes resembled deep wounds, dark blue like an endless abyss. His lips were pale, thin, and tightly drawn, long forgetting the art of smiling, and utterly unaware of joy. He was a serious man, devoid of humor, obstinate, and rarely forgiving. Known for his stoic demeanor, he often engaged in a subtle habit of grinding his teeth while lost in contemplation. Meanwhile, the master of coin, Petyr Baelish, was engaging in light-hearted banter with the master of laws, Lysa Arryn, eliciting hearty laughter from the latter. Petyr, though of average build, possessed a strikingly handsome visage, his gray-green eyes twinkling with mischief and a small tuft of beard adorning his chin, with dark hair flecked with gray. When Grand Maester Pycelle noticed the hand of the king, he slowly took his seat. His bald head was speckled with age spots, while sparse white strands hung limply at his temples. His chain of office, composed of 24 different medals, hung heavily from his neck down to his chest, and his long, snow-white beard cascaded down to his torso. After Jon took his seat, the Master of Whisperers approached him, delivering the latest intelligence from the ravens. Varys, a eunuch with a rotund figure and a bald head, exuded the fragrance of House Arryn. He favored comfortable attire, vibrant silks of the finest quality, and soft slippers that muffled his footsteps. It was the dead of night, and many still slumbered. Yet the urgency of the situation compelled the lords to rise hastily for this meeting. As Jon began to read the note by candlelight in silence, a palpable tension filled the room. Every breath was held as the lords focused intently on the rhythm of their leader's breathing. The most disconcerting aspect was the rapid yet deliberately concealed nature of his breaths, a sign that Jon might already be seething with anger. Though he was aging, he had served in the King's Council for over a decade, earning the respect of Robert Baratheon as a father figure. My lords, I apologize for the delay. Today, the king is indisposed, and I am here to represent him in full authority, Jon stated, passing the note to Stannis, urging everyone to examine it and share their thoughts. My lord, as of now, 30,000 men have gathered at Crow's Nest, with a steady influx of nobles entering the Stormlands. The Martells and the Tyrells have even publicly accused the Lannisters of breaching chivalric codes. While the Lannisters' stance remains uncertain, Varys sweetly interjected, rubbing his fingers together. Interestingly, even amidst warfare, the Lannisters have not neglected to send wine, perfumes, and soap to the capital, while the Tyrells continue to supply wheat and silk to Crow's Nest. Petyr Baelish quipped, suggesting that the Lions and Roses seem to believe that business must persist despite the conflict. Lancel Baratheon laughed heartily, but Stannis interrupted his mirth, handing the note to Petyr Baelish while maintaining a stern expression. The letter outlines 10 accusations against the South, yet only one aligns with our understanding, that the Lannisters refuse to acknowledge the theft of 13 ships' worth of cargo. Perhaps my brother would be privy to the details. His brother, Lancel Baratheon, was tall and handsome, with dark hair cascading to his shoulders, always impeccably groomed, and he preferred to shave his beard completely. I understand. What is it that I comprehend? Lancel leaned forward, peering at Stannis with a smile. Come now, we both know full well your intentions to make that Tyrell girl, Margaery, yet another mistress of Robert's, Stannis replied. It was no secret that Lancel was scheming to have Robert replace his queen in King's Landing, suggesting that Margaery bore a resemblance to Lyanna Stark. He spoke well of her in Robert's presence, and the girl made herself conspicuously available to the king, though Robert remained unresponsive. At the time of the incident, Margaery and her brother were in King's Landing, currently under house arrest. Observant minds might suspect that Lancel had ulterior motives. Look at this, a note from Lancel, detailing so many accusations against the South. It seems they have indeed aroused public ire, Petyr Baelish remarked, noticing Jon Arryn's increasingly grim expression and attempting to shift the topic. Stannis Baratheon, upon hearing Lancel's name, betrayed a flicker of shadow in his eyes. However, Roland Connington was not the Stormlands protector. He lacked the authority to muster troops. According to the laws of the Seven Kingdoms, the Grand Maester Pycelle had yet to finish speaking when he was interrupted. Enough. Pycelle, send word back to Eagle's Nest, instructing him to reign in those nobles. We shall seek justice for him and the Stark family. Jon Connington emphatically slammed his hand on the table, establishing the tone. Jon Arryn felt a twinge of discontent towards Tyrell. Initially, he had been pleased that the South had cast aside its past and returned to the political epicenter of King's Landing. Moreover, he had recently heard numerous whispers about the Lannisters, remaining neutral regarding the actions of Renly Baratheon. However, with the recent events unfolding, he could only feel disappointment. At 72 years of age, Jon Arryn was no longer youthful. He had contemplated asking Robert to assume control of state affairs, but Robert was weary of managing the realm's politics and the intrigues of court. Even now, some still referred to Robert as a usurper. Had he forgotten how many noble houses rose in arms to fight for House Targaryen? They remained still for now, but should an opportunity arise, they would not hesitate to threaten the lives of him, Robert, and the Stark family. Were it not for the Targaryens opening their gates and welcoming the lion into the city, the outcome would have remained uncertain. Therefore, the only course was to suppress the war, striving for greater recognition of the Baratheon dynasty. Chapter 6. The Dominion Between Legs at the vast expanse of white Poplar shore. Roland had assembled an army of 30,000, half of whom were heavy cavalry and regular horsemen, while the remainder consisted of crossbowmen, archers, spear-wielders, and heavily armored pikemen, alongside a diverse array of mercenaries. After several days of stalemate, Tyrell finally dispatched envoys to negotiate. The south was rife with undercurrents. The Tyrell family relied on marriage alliances to maintain their rule, their governance precarious and hesitant to take risks. Previously under the protection of the Targaryens, the fall of the Dragon dynasty made the Tyrells even more averse to danger. It was only today that they chose to send emissaries, seeking to resolve the state of war between the two families through negotiation. Garland Tyrell traversed the wall of soldiers step by step until he reached Roland's side. Bowing slightly as he said, "Sir Roland, I bring greetings of goodwill from House Tyrell." Roland ignored him, continuing his sword practice with Gendry Storm. In this world of political intrigue, a hero might perish at the hands of an unknown foe, and Roland was determined not to be caught off guard in a moment of crisis. However, by the 6th day of rigorous training, he could endure no longer. Clad in heavy armor and engaged in high-intensity sparring was excruciating for a university student who could easily tire from mere physical training, both mentally and physically drained. Gendry, relentless in his encouragement, insisted, "My lord, perhaps your previous stages were confined to the Whispering Horn or Eagle's Nest, where you might never have encountered true danger. But now your stage is the Seven Kingdoms." This persuaded Roland. He was not without understanding, yet he was hindered by the lethargy of his previous life, reluctant to practice. "Damn it, practice swordsmanship. Train, train, train. Master the art in 3 years, slaying one dragon with a single strike. One blow for the Night King." As Roland envisioned the future, he was suddenly struck on the right arm by Green's sword. His arm tingled, rendering him unable to wield his weapon, compelling him to retreat hastily. In the blink of an eye, Green closed in and toppled Roland. Now pinned beneath Green's foot, his sword poised at Roland's throat, Green admonished, "My lord, do not let your mind wander amidst the fray." Cursing under his breath, Roland attempted to rise, but faltered as Green delivered a powerful two-handed strike. He regained his footing just in time to deflect Green's blow with his shield, struggling to counterattack. Green retaliated with a fierce bash to Roland's shield, simultaneously delivering a low strike that sent him sprawling. "My lord, there is no fairness in battle," Green remarked. Roland's inexperienced soldiers, initially cheering for their master, fell silent under the relentless onslaught of Green. Rising from the ground, Roland removed his helmet, the scorching sun beating down upon him, nearly scorching his skin. Sweat poured from his brow, soaking his garments. "Today, whoever can defeat Sir Green shall receive a sheep, a barrel of wine, and 100 gold dragons." Roland laughed heartily at the soldiers' cheers. "My lord, you are being unfair," Green replied, exasperated. "What shall I receive if I triumph over them?" "The same reward, a fair exchange," Roland retorted, slowly retreating, his body bruised and aching, yet feeling no shame before his men. The stronger they were, the more joy he felt. He practiced swordsmanship merely to possess some means of defense in unforeseen circumstances, not to lead a charge. Youthful exuberance often led to brawls in school. But warfare was a different matter, he mused. Once, envious of Roland's goods, bandits ambushed a caravan on the main road. Upon receiving word, he personally led troops to eradicate the thieves. Yet, the brutality of that skirmish, with heads cleaved and soldiers howling in agony over severed limbs, left an indelible mark on him. The sight of a bandit, his belly slashed open, lying on the ground awaiting death, was unforgettable. If such a small conflict was so savage, what could he expect from a clash of tens of thousands? From that point onward, he resolved to remain a mere voice at the Eagle's Nest, staying behind the lines during battle, as he recognized himself as nothing more than an ordinary university student. He often admired the predecessors who traversed realms, capable of slaying thousands with ease, achieving victories against overwhelming odds. "Behold, a bastard vanquishes the Griffin, how foolish the sword," Baron Stephen whispered to Galantir. "This foolish Griffin has garnered such adoration not through dragons, nor by the intimidation of great armies, nor by sending his sister to the enemy's bed. I hear the Duke and Miss Rose still linger in King's Landing." "Sir Baron Stephen," Gallant replied, casting a glance back before returning his gaze to Roland, who was being hailed amidst the throng of soldiers. "Long live the Griffin! Long live Roland!" Their cheers pierced his ears like a blade, grating and harsh. What could 100 gold dragons truly accomplish? Tyrell could indeed offer more, yet. Why do the farmers and soldiers regard him with such disdain? And what of those damned nobles? Are they truly oblivious to the fact that should the South unite, no force among the 7 kingdoms could stand against them? Galen pondered. Your younger sister is 14 this year, isn't she? Can she withstand the pressure exerted by Robert? I express my concern, Baron remarked with a dismissive tone. How delightful. At times, I genuinely envy Highgarden, with its bountiful harvests year after year. Unlike Stonehelm, where one cannot even sleep soundly, the fragrance of the grasslands is infinitely more pleasant than the scorching sands of the desert. Sir Baron, if the letter was unclear, allow me to reiterate, the goods were not taken by us. Do you truly believe we would lack for your trifling possessions? Galen retorted, annoyed by Baron's sardonic tone. As for my sister, there is no need for your concern, Sir Baron. I come here bearing a desire for peace. We both understand that conflict would yield no favorable outcome for either party. I hope you might counsel Lord Roland wisely. He is still young and should not fall prey to the machinations of certain treacherous individuals. Rest assured, Sir Galen, I am merely a humble cupbearer to Lord Roland. Whatever decisions he makes, the House of Swan will support him, Baron declared, patting his sword. I believe, Sir Galen, it would be wise for you to worry about the Duke in King's Landing and the young Miss Marjorie, barely 14. My goodness, I sometimes wonder how your sister could spread her legs and not have Robert take advantage. I hear he is quite indiscriminate, even with the vegetable-selling peasant women. Haha. Galen sorrowfully realized that despite his family's 300 years of dominion over the South, they had yet to shed the label of upstarts due to a lack of military achievements. Now, a new burden loomed over them. And while his father and sister gained notoriety in King's Landing, even the fishmongers of Dorne now knew of the Tyrell family's failed matrimonial endeavors, leading to their house arrest. Chapter 7. Internal and External Strife. Willow Shore of Stormlands. Galen Tyrell felt utterly fatigued. Following the confinement of his father and sister, he hastily convened with his family, riding tirelessly for a day and a night, switching horses thrice and consuming naught, until he finally arrived at Willow Shore to negotiate an end to this damned conflict. If there was any house Tyrell least desired enmity with, it would undoubtedly be House Connington, as this conflict had made everything abundantly clear. House Connington now held intricate ties with the South. For instance, the Redwyne family of the Arbor was in discussions with Roland regarding collaboration prior to the outbreak of hostilities. The Redwyne family, loyal to Highgarden, is a noble house from the Arbor, located on a grand island south of Highgarden. With formidable strength, the Redwyne family shares close ties with the Tyrells. Galen's grandmother, the Queen of Thorns, hails from the Redwyne lineage, and they have consistently provided powerful naval protection to the Reach. Their traditional naval prowess rivals that of the Royal Fleet or the Iron Fleet. The Redwyne family is an ancient noble house with a long-standing legacy. Their lands produce the finest wines in all of Westeros, including exquisite sweet reds and golden wines, bestowing upon the Redwyne family immense wealth. The emergence of Clinton's white wine, touted as a beverage befitting only men, undoubtedly disrupted their market. The Redwyne family hastily dispatched envoys to propose collaboration with Roland, who possessed exquisite wine while they had established sales channels, making them ideal partners. Their negotiations were nearly finalized when the outbreak of conflict led Roland to dismiss the envoy, igniting resentment within Redwyne towards Tyrell. It was bluntly stated that this was a matter of utmost importance for the Redwyne family, with implications for their legacy and prosperity. Meanwhile, the introduction of perfume sustained a multitude of minor nobility in the South. Only the southern regions of the 7 kingdoms boasted such an abundance of flowers. As perfume became increasingly popular, the demand for flowers surged, leading Garland to realize the lucrative potential of the flower trade. Even House Hightower joined the ranks of flower merchants. Though affluent, no one would refuse additional wealth. However, following the outbreak of conflict, perfume production ceased, rendering their harvested flowers worthless overnight. The wilting blossoms represented a significant financial loss, as Garland dared not listen to the whispers of southern nobility regarding Tyrell, fearing no humiliation could surpass that endured in the presence of his father and younger sister. Amidst internal strife and external threats, House Rowan openly opposed the Tyrells. During the reign of King Mern IX of the Reach, the conqueror Aegon Targaryen landed in Westeros and initiated his campaign of conquest. King Mern IX of the Reach allied with Lord Loren Lannister of Casterly Rock to assault Aegon Targaryen, suffering a devastating defeat in the Battle of the Burning. The entire Gardner lineage perished in the flames, with none surviving. Conqueror Aegon advanced into the Reach, and Sir Harlan Tyrell, the acting Lord of Highgarden, surrendered the city. In return, Aegon granted the dominion of Highgarden and the Reach to House Tyrell. From that moment onward, House Tyrell frequently faced challenges from other nobility of higher lineage. Closer to the Gardner family. Peace. What a jest. We are currently in a position of strength. Speak plainly, for when our forces amass, it will be time for reckoning. Delay now, and we may only discuss after the outcome is determined. Roland gestured for Garland Tyrell to take a seat, frowning at the parchment bearing the Betrothal seal. Its harsh wording and commanding tone unsettling him. It is important to remember that the Iron Throne is not a central authority. As long as Roland's troops do not march on King's Landing, there is little reason for the Iron Throne to intervene, though discontent brewed within him. The weight of such a declaration could be burdensome, especially since Clinton and the lords of the Stormlands were nominally vassals of the Iron Throne, and he, as a knight, remained a subject of Robert. Sir Roland, without a doubt this conflict is misguided. If it can be halted, Tyrell would not hesitate to offer some compensation to House Hightower. Garland Tyrell sighed, adopting a tone of pleading that disregarded family honor and dignity. He understood that their family was teetering on the brink of existence. A single misstep could plunge them into oblivion. On the surface, it appeared that Highgarden and Stonehelm were contending for the freshwater resources along the Dornish River, yet unexpectedly, Roland Clinton had quietly amassed 30,000 soldiers without revealing his full strength, escalating the conflict between the Stormlands and the South. If it were merely the Stormlands that were embroiled in turmoil, it would be one thing. However, within days, the ridicule surrounding the failed matrimonial endeavor in Tyrell reached even the fishmongers of Dorne, a development that was decidedly unusual, particularly as it served to embarrass the Lannisters. The younger sister aspired to supplant Cersei Lannister, who was already a mother of 2 sons and a daughter, while their father, Tywin Lannister, valued the family's reputation above even life itself. Especially with Roland's forces encamped at the Weeping Willow, the specter of war loomed ominously. And Garland could scarcely entertain the notion of Tywin refraining from intervening, for all 7 kingdoms knew that in the art of treachery, Tywin was unrivaled. Moreover, the stance of Dorne, a historic adversary of the South for a millennium, remained uncertain, while the Iron Islands continued to covet the riches of the South. The Tyrells had dispatched ravens to summon the lords of the South, yet astonishingly, half of them expressed reluctance to respond. Some were ambiguous, others failed to reply altogether, and a few even emerged to mock and oppose them. Garland could hardly believe the ferocity of the family's impending crisis. A single misstep could incite a collective onslaught. 1,000 wagons of wheat, along with 500,000 golden dragons. Roland observed Garland rise excitedly, gesturing with fervor. Look, we have 30,000 men who would abandon their tools to fight alongside you. The daily sustenance for 30,000 mouths is an astronomical figure, and our losses are not insignificant. Moreover, our soldiers harbor no desire for battle, placing their fates in the hands of the 7. They wish to return to their homelands. Yet your esteemed family's actions breed anxiety among them, fearing another armed incursion to plunder their homes. These sacrifices serve as a semblance of assurance. They will think, behold, the Tyrells have invested so much, they surely will not err again, thus allowing them to lay down their weapons and return home. What say you, Sir Garland? We have not been vanquished, Sir Roland, Garland asserted, fixing his gaze upon Roland. We shall not accept such terms. Roland, appearing regretful, shook his head and rose to pat Garland on the shoulder. I am truly sorry, Sir Garland. It seems we shall meet upon the battlefield instead. May the 7 bless you. I sincerely hope to see you after the war's conclusion. You are a man of honor. Chapter 8. Peace Negotiations, Weeping Willow. Stormlands. In the verdant expanse of the grasslands, where spring melded into summer, the sun shone brightly, casting a warm glow, and a gentle breeze stirred the air, creating an ideal atmosphere for languor. The woods echoed with the chirping of birds, their melodies slicing through the tranquil sky, while the surroundings remained hushed and serene. Yet this once peaceful landscape was shattered by the clash of arms, as 2 armies confronted each other from several hundred paces apart along the banks of a winding river. At the center of this standoff, several nobles mounted on noble steeds appeared to be negotiating, each accompanied by attendants bearing their respective family banners. Sir Roland Clinton, your name resounds throughout the 7 kingdoms, one of them remarked. Huh, and who might you be? Roland inquired, noting that this disabled individual representing Highgarden must possess considerable significance, particularly after the discord with Garland. I am Velas Tyrell, the heir of Highgarden. As you can observe, I suffered a fracture during a tournament. Typically, I find solace in the tranquility of the Highgarden, indulging in literature and tending to flowers. Thus it is quite understandable that you do not recognize me. To be candid, I am in considerable discomfort atop this steed. I humbly request your pardon and ask if I might invite Sir Roland to sit and converse. Valaris. despite glancing at his own broken leg, bore no resentment as he dismounted with the assistance of his attendants. Varys Targaryen is the eldest son of Duke Mace Tyrell and Lady Alicent Hightower. During his inaugural participation in the tournament, he faced Prince Oberyn Martell of Dorne, who unceremoniously unseated him. Regrettably, his foot became ensnared in the stirrup, causing him to be crushed beneath his mount, resulting in the shattering of his knee and leaving him crippled. Although this incident exacerbated the long-standing animosity between House Tyrell and House Martell, Varys never harbored any animosity towards Oberyn. Rather, the two maintained a correspondence thereafter. Following this ordeal, Varys devoted himself entirely to scholarly pursuits. His grandmother, Olenna Redwine, despite her disfavor for her son, held her grandson in high regard. "I have been informed by my younger brother, Sir Roland. Yet I wonder if your demands are excessively stringent," Varys remarked. "You must understand that while war may complicate matters, it does not signify that the Tyrells fear conflict. If a peaceful resolution is attainable, why not pursue it?" Sir Roland, lost in thought, appeared imposing, yet internally he was in turmoil. Initially, he sought merely to assert his authority over the Tyrells through a localized conflict, which would enhance his reputation regardless of the outcome, preparing him for future endeavors while assessing the influence and enmity of his lineage, marking allies and foes alike. However, he found himself confronted not with a meager turnout, but an overwhelming presence. He was astonished to discover his own significance. Following the assassination of Eddard Stark, Robb's claim to the north as king amounted to a mere 18,000 men, yet the sheer scale of forces now unsettled him. As he found himself caught in a precarious situation, Roland had no desire for a full-scale war with the South. The mobilization potential was terrifying, and the outcome would lead to mutual devastation. Nevertheless, the Iron Throne commanded him to withdraw his troops, and should he retreat without ever encountering the enemy, the lords would deem him cowardly, inflicting a grievous blow to his reputation. Thus, he felt compelled to involve the Lannisters, leveraging the circumstances to compel the Tyrells to the negotiating table. No one understood the power of public opinion better than Roland, especially considering Tywin's emphasis on familial honor. Thus, the matter of Marjorie was a promotion orchestrated by him. He had already expended considerable resources for this conflict, and if he could not secure a substantial gain at the negotiating table, it would be preferable to engage in a fair confrontation with the South, as he could afford the loss of a few thousand men. Should the Tyrells seek retribution thereafter, he would, at the very least, ensure they suffered considerable losses, bolstered by potential allies who would surely support him in exchange for concessions. "Sir Roland, what are your thoughts on the matter?" Roland squinted in silence as Baron Swan stepped forward in indignation. "Varys Tyrell, your soldiers have infested my city like cockroaches, every night. I feel as though they are crawling upon me." Baroness' roar reverberated across the plains, casting a heavy pall over the atmosphere. "Your soldiers, akin to wretched rats scurrying through a gutter, have plundered village after village, showing no mercy even to a nursing infant. Seven gods, how can you bear such a heartlessness? My brothers, my people, have perished at the hands of your so-called knights." A chill permeated Baroness' words, leaving Velis feeling a bone-deep frost. "Sir Baron, your house has also slain our folk along the borders," Velis interjected. "I do not wish to be ensnared in these feudal disputes. Sir Roland, while we can offer you assurances, we too require a guarantee from you. Speak, and if it lies within my power, I shall deliver. I have heard of your brother, Raymond Clinton. I hope he will foster the Targaryen family until maturity. Rest assured, he shall be treated as the most esteemed guest in the High Hall, and you are most welcome to visit as well." Velis' grandmother had long desired for him to wed Clinton's sister. Yet Clinton harbored a certain animosity towards the Targaryens. It is said that Roland has both a brother and a sister. Should enmity turn to kinship, it would be fortuitous. This conflict has revealed Clinton's considerable influence in the South. Through marriage, their rule would be fortified, garnering greater loyalty from the southern houses. Furthermore, it would be advantageous for Clinton's business to entwine with a noble family, due to the agricultural limitations and production constraints on the continent of Westeros. The resources produced are woefully inadequate. For the lower-tier nobility and knights, aside from maintaining the basic sustenance for their vassals and farmers, their own yields are scant. In an era devoid of sterilization and contraceptive methods, the burden of offspring and personal consumption becomes a significant dilemma. They must ensure a certain level of material provision for defense, while also being obligated to support the guardians that protect them, leaving little to uphold a standard of living. Typically, the sons of these lords, aside from the legitimate heirs to the estate, require financial support to establish their independence once they reach adulthood, a customary practice, albeit without formal decree. This reality burdens the lower nobility with exorbitant living costs, making survival exceedingly difficult. Faced with such circumstances, these individuals began to send their offspring to be fostered by subordinate lords or those with whom they are familiar, akin to servitude, thereby reducing their own consumption. This practice affords bastards, who cannot inherit lands, a ladder to attain nobility. Moreover, alliances and marriages among the great houses often employ this method. For instance, Loras Tyrell, in his youth, was fostered at Storm's End as a squire to Renly Baratheon, possibly the inception of their clandestine romance. Similarly, renowned figures like Robert and Eddard Stark were once fostered by House Arryn in the Vale. Baron Swan was also dispatched to serve as Roland's squire. Chapter 9. The Olive Branch of House Tyrell, Storm's End, White Sycamore Shore, Velis's utterance transformed Roland into a sage-like figure. According to law and custom, when it comes to inheritance, only the firstborn son possesses any significant rights, while others are generally devoid of such privileges. Should a noble's firstborn meet with misfortune and leave no suitable legitimate heir to inherit his estate, relatives may claim the inheritance and titles. Noble titles, such as that of a lord of a certain land, are hereditary. However, knighthood is not, as it is typically conferred based on individual merit rather than lineage. In illustrious families, the elder offspring will inherit the principal titles and lands, while lesser estates and residences are bestowed upon the younger siblings, who become vassals to their elder brother. Thus, the inheritance rights in Westeros can be delineated into categories: legitimate firstborns, relatives, and bastards. In this context, Roland, having no children of his own, will have Raymond inherit Clinton upon his demise, while sending Raymond to the Tyrells signifies his desire for a few more years of life. Roland is acutely aware that in the original narrative, the Tyrells poisoned the eternal monarch Joffrey Baratheon to install a more easily manipulated Tommen Baratheon. The thought that one day the Tyrells might deem Roland a liability and act similarly is not lost on him. No, my father urged me to look after the family before his passing. Roland is not hypocritical. Had he been with another family, he would have sent them away. After all, the distance he has traveled has created a rift with his original siblings, and there exists little affection. Nonetheless, Roland feels a moral obligation to foster their well-being and happiness. Highgarden is not a favorable place. It tends to soften men's resolve. Sir Roland, this is our final stipulation, Velis interjected, frowning, for he perceived it as a true bottom line. Raymond, at 13 years of age, could easily return after 3 unhappy years in Highgarden. What perplexed Velis was Roland's vehement resistance. Raymond is a good lad. We have taught him the basics of etiquette, combat training, and the study of law and conduct. He learned swiftly. Drawing a dagger from his belt, Roland severed a nearby tree trunk, holding it aloft as he continued. Look, Raymond is akin to this branch. Once he departs, he will wither without nourishment. I wish for our affairs to remain unentangled with his fate. I hope you will consider an alternative condition. Sir, you are quite devoted to your family, which perhaps allows you to comprehend my perspective. Velis trembled slightly as he rose. In our minds, you are a youth in power, filled with uncertainty that breeds fear. Your rumored volatility and propensity for conflict have colored the Southern Realm's perception since your military mobilization began. The Tyrell vassals comprise over 20 noble houses and more than 300 landed knights. The walls of Highgarden are sturdy, yet they may awaken to the sight of the Griffin banner at dawn, necessitating assurances that you will not hastily reignite hostilities. Velis understood that since the failure of the last royalist endeavor, the Tyrells, bereft of Targaryen protection, had seen their control over the south diminish to a historical low. Endless entanglements with Clinton would only render them more vulnerable, thus he sought a decisive resolution. The Tyrells also required external intervention to maintain their stringent suppression of rebellious forces. Undoubtedly, Robert on the Iron Throne possessed the necessary strength, but his alliance could not be secured without proper negotiation. Velas finds himself in a predicament, burdened by his father Mysterial's fervent desire to see his younger sister ascend to the throne. Had it not been for this farcical situation, he would not be in such a passive state. From atop his horse, Velas produces a blood orange to share with Roland, asserting that he can procure anything one could desire, from Old Oak Town to Bitterbridge and upstream of the Blueburn River, where all heed Mysterial's commands. All that is required is a guarantee from you. Should our negotiations falter, we shall resort to arms. Speak. Roland's patience is waning. If you are unwilling to consider Raymond's proposal to marry into the Highgarden, then the alternatives are clear. I must wed your sister Eleanor Clinton, or you must take my sister Marjorie Tiller as your bride. In the Game of Thrones, the most beautiful women often wield deceit, and the most intelligent are perilous. Roland harbors no particular obsession with collecting allies, yet he believes he can manage Marjorie. However, the motivations of House Tiller remain a perplexing enigma. Though Roland requires no allies, he cannot deny a flicker of interest. The rationale is straightforward. House Tiller possesses the most fertile lands, nurturing a multitude of densely populated villages and towns, along with the most advanced commerce. Their grains, silks, gems, and wines are found in every corner of the Seven Kingdoms. Roland is acutely aware that to sustain such an extensive enterprise, their strength, intelligence, and networks are finely honed. While he has achieved considerable success, he cannot replicate Tiller's scale in the short term. Moreover, time is of the essence. The White Walkers are poised to awaken, the Targaryens are on the verge of resurgence, and the onset of the War of the Five Kings will undoubtedly disrupt commerce. It is wiser to navigate these tumultuous waters by forming an alliance with House Tiller through marriage. In a moment of silence, Roland comprehends the entirety of the situation. Regardless of the angle from which it is viewed, aligning with House Tiller is beneficial for him. As for what House Tiller hopes to gain from him, Roland is not particularly concerned. For once an alliance is formed, should he discover that House Tiller seeks to exploit him, he would not hesitate to eliminate any potential threats, as he cannot allow them to persist. My sister Eleanor is but 11 years of age, he muses, still reluctant to wed Marjorie, for Velas is the heir to Highgarden. Should his progeny possess Clinton blood, future entanglements could create significant complications. Yet, Velas is a good man. From Roland's understanding, he is a sunny recluse, often engrossed in books and scholarly pursuits. Thus, Eleanor's marriage would not be a grave injustice. Fear not, my lord. We may first become betrothed at Highgarden, and once she has reached maturity, we shall wed. Velas appears pleased with Roland's acquiescence. I shall vow before the old and new gods that Eleanor will be my one true love. If you consent, we may hold the betrothal ceremony next month, and I shall invite all the nobility of the Reach to witness this occasion. I kindly urge you, Sir Roland, and your esteemed friends to be present. In Westeros, the age of maturity for boys is 16, and likewise for girls, who are considered mature only after their first menstruation. Before this milestone, they are regarded simply as girls. Thereafter, they are seen as women of maturity. To be more precise, a woman is both a girl and a woman prior to marriage. An 11-year-old girl may become engaged, yet actual marriage must await several more years. Chapter 10. The long night quietly approaches the summer hall of Stormlands. Under the formidable influence of the Iron Throne, Clinton and Tyrell reached a consensus of reconciliation. Baron Swan returned 174 soldiers who had attacked Stonehelm to Tyrell, who in turn relinquished claims to the disputed Freshwater River and several surrounding villages, compensating with a ransom to reclaim his men. Additionally, 1,000 wagons of wheat and 500,000 golden dragons were promised, with Roland vowing to distribute the dragons among the lords while keeping the wheat for himself, a division that pleased the lords of Stormlands. Following the establishment of peace, both factions held a banquet on the plains of Weeping Willow, attended by representatives of the Iron Throne and numerous nobles from the Stormlands and the South. During the feast, clusters of nobles would approach Valaris, feigning reverence while mockingly chanting "Long live Highgarden," as if such ridicule were their form of entertainment. Roland found it astonishing that even traitors could be so brazen, their sardonic tones deserving of commentary. It seemed evident that feudalism and centralization were markedly different. The banquet concluded amidst the clinking of goblets, with nobles departing to their respective domains. When Roland and his party arrived at Summer Hall, darkness still enveloped the sky. Their journey took less time than what Green had indicated. How much less, Roland could not discern, as he lacked a timekeeping device. He began to wonder if his sense of time was faltering or if the harbinger of the long night was silently approaching. Roland vividly recalled that the long night bore resemblance to the Little Ice Age of his past life, yet it was far more severe. This long night was typically accompanied by the others. Historical accounts depicted it as a winter lasting an entire generation, blanketing Westeros in an icy gloom. In this frigid world, people grew up and perished in the unforgiving cold, never witnessing the arrival of spring. No one was spared. From the king and his castle to the most wretched of servants, all succumbing to the relentless winter. Mothers, in a desperate attempt to spare their children from suffering, took their lives, weeping as their tears froze upon their cheeks. To some scholars at the Citadel, the tales of the long night seemed too absurd. A certain maester speculated in his writings that the so-called others were merely a tribe of the first men, ancestors of today's wildlings. He theorized that when the long night descended, they were compelled to migrate south, igniting a succession of wars. He believed that the brutality attributed to the others was a fabrication by House Stark and the Night's Watch. seeking to inflate their historical significance and present themselves as humanity's saviors while concealing their own gains from the territorial conflict. However, Roland knew the truth, yet deemed it unwise to proclaim it to the world. In the present day, people dismissed such notions, with adults recounting tales of the others as mere stories to deter disobedient children, akin to the fable of the boy who cried wolf. Little did they know the wolf was indeed approaching, a bitter irony lost on them. The Hall of Midsummer is a mere 3 days' journey from the capital of the Seven Kingdoms, King's Landing, 2 days from the fortress of whispering winds that occupies his thoughts, and just 1 day from the burgeoning eagle's nest. Regardless of whether night descends, the surface of the shallows at Midsummer Hall remains remarkably unremarkable. The aftermath of the Great Fire has left behind not only the ravaged and unsightly ruins of the castle, but also an indelible shadow that lingers in the hearts of the people. My lord, the count is complete. The path into the deep woods from here is treacherous. We shall set out at dawn. I have instructed the soldiers to rest in place, Greenstorm remarked quietly, observing Roland's weary demeanor. The weaklings I have placed under watch. I have dealt with 2 who still attempted to flee. Roland chuckled wryly, pondering, I believe I have done quite well. Why then do some still choose to abandon their posts? He was acutely aware of the boundless potential that can be unleashed in the face of death. Yet during the standoff at Poplar Beach against the Southern Army, many disregarded Roland's authority and deserted. It should be noted that the soldiers he commanded hailed from the directly governed lands of Eagle's Nest, having toiled the land of Clinton for generations. Although a significant portion of their harvest filled Clinton's coffers, it at least ensured the basic sustenance of their families. My lord, they are still filled with naivety. I believe it unnecessary to be so lenient with them. They are akin to sheep. By instilling fear, they will fight with fervor. Why promise a year's tax exemption? Baron Shivan recalled the time when he gathered troops at Eagle's Nest and chanced upon Roland rallying them, during which Roland had promised a year of tax relief upon victory in the war. At that moment, Baron, still unfamiliar with Roland, begrudgingly observed him squander resources. Baron wished for Roland to understand that it was a natural obligation for farmers to fight for their lord. There was no need for a year's tax exemption. However, Baron's perspective was rather superficial. Indeed, threats could incite farmers to fight fiercely, yet tangible sustenance could ignite their passion for victory. Roland shook his head, unfazed by Baron's jibe, recognizing the necessity of a dual perspective. If I win, there is more to gain. If I lose, will they still have the audacity to ask for aid? In truth, this was not mere empty promise. Once Roland's commercial ventures flourished, he would regard such agricultural products with disdain. Yet he could not simply give them away. He needed to create an illusion for the soldiers and farmers that by following him to victory, they too would reap greater rewards, thus unleashing boundless energy within them. Roland, a soul from a 21st century university, understood the farmers' deep attachment to the land and the hardships of their lives. If a year's tax exemption could compel soldiers and farmers alike to give their last drop of blood for him, it was worth it. Moreover, he keenly remembered the famine that ensued a year after the War of the Five Kings, which caused grain prices to soar and led to severe distress among the farmers. Naturally, he wished to prevent chaos in his rear lines, thus seeking a rationale for the farmers to stockpile grain for the coming years. What shall my lord do with them? Green inquired. Roland sighed deeply, unreservedly settling onto the hay-strewn ground. His entire body ached, and his feet throbbed painfully, tempting him to remove his boots for some much-needed relief. Since traversing into this realm, he had been incessantly occupied, yearning now for a restful slumber upon a velvet bed. He could not resort to killing. Instead, he decided to send them to mine. Roland understood that a soft approach to assassination would inflict far greater anguish. The title of a weakling would haunt them for a lifetime, serving as a grim reminder to the soldiers of the fate that awaited deserters. While he entertained the notion of displaying their heads on steel pikes before the gates of Eagle's Nest Fortress, the fortress was already under strain, and he could not afford to lose laborers to death. As the long night descended, thoughts of retreat began to occupy Roland's mind. Gazing at the stars twinkling above, he pondered his predicament. Chapter 11. The secret passage of the Midsummer Hall. The urgent call of Glenn jolted Roland from his reverie. He rose from the grassy ground, realizing he had dozed off while lost in thought. In his dream, he found himself kneeling in an unfamiliar church, surrounded by whispers of curses, prayers, and pleas for mercy echoing in his ears. Uncertain of its significance, he felt a pang of trepidation as he recalled the dream. Upon rising, he noticed the thick fog shrouding the atmosphere, suggesting impending rain. He began to brush off the hay clinging to him, and despite having raised his collar beforehand, a few stray strands made their way to his back, causing discomfort. As he removed his outer coat and shirt, one hand reaching back to rid himself of the bothersome hay, he suddenly froze. The scene felt eerily familiar, as if it had manifested from a dream or emerged directly from his memories without warning. A sense of déjà vu enveloped him. His limbs grew stiff with unease, for he feared being ensnared in some supernatural occurrence. This world was rife with magic, sorcery, and alchemy, and coupled with the ominous dreams, such phenomena were far from reassuring. The sun had yet to rise, and the oppressive, fog-laden atmosphere began to chill his spirit. On the road, several hunters wielding makeshift short bows ventured towards the depths of the mountains, hoping to return by nightfall with game to enrich their families' meals. Some carried burdens, while others ventured with nothing but a staff. The majority were young men, though the occasional girl or older individual could be spotted among them. Each bore the weary appearance of long travelers. Some trudged with heads bowed and shoulders slumped, yet they set off early nonetheless. Some gazed into the distant horizon, while others cast their eyes toward the rain-laden sky. "Sir, you should take shelter from the rain while the soldiers set up the tents. It may take a while," Glenn urged, his back to Roland as he pointed toward the desolate midsummer hall. "Glenn," Roland sighed, "there is no need to concern yourself with your surname. I have always regarded you as a brother." He assessed Glenn's overly sensitive demeanor, noting the change in his expression since Baron Swin had begun serving Roland. Though Roland had no intention of changing Glenn's surname to Clinton, he had refused to do so. Glenn may not have been the strongest, but he was undoubtedly the most suitable companion for Roland. Green perceived every smile as an insult and every glance as a provocation. Consequently, he endured scorn and ridicule, ascending from idleness to a position at Eagle's Nest that was second only to Roland. When provoked, Green's fists remained tightly clenched, whether gripping the hilt of a sword or simply balled in frustration, yet he refrained from violence, the sword remaining sheathed. Baron spoke to Green in a tone laced with condescension, which Green interpreted as a derision aimed at his status as a bastard. However, Roland understood that Baron, the simpleton, spoke with a cold indifference not out of malice, but rather due to the harshness of an era that was cruel to illegitimate children. "Hey, Baron," Roland called, shaking his head in resignation as he watched Green walk away. He gestured for Baron to follow him into the summer hall, a dilapidated structure overrun with weeds, yet, thankfully, still capable of providing shelter from the rain. "My lord, this is an ominous place," Baron remarked, his demeanor suggesting he was all ears. "It is a well-known tale in Storm's End. King Aegon V summoned many of his friends and family to the summer hall under the pretense of celebrating the birth of Rhaegar Targaryen. My father was among them. The king also sought the fire wizards to attempt to hatch dragons from wildfire. A venture met with noble opposition, yet Aegon remained obstinate. It appears to have failed?" Roland mused. "One cannot help but feel that remaining in the company of Targaryens will eventually lead to being turned to ash. Indeed, Aegon V was a good king." Baron retorted with a hint of sarcasm. He endeavored to improve the lives of common folk, earning their affection, yet incurring the ire of the noble class. His attempts at reform, granting more rights to the populace, were met with fierce resistance from the affluent Lannisters and Tyrells, who accused him of attempting to strip them of their divinely ordained freedoms and rights, even going so far as to openly rebel against him. Aegon was forced into continual compromise, gradually depleting his patience, and he longed to bring dragons back into the world. On the day of Rhaegar's birth, believing it to be auspicious, he naively trusted those wizard charlatans, sacrificing himself and his firstborn to the roaring flames. Therefore, the beloved king perished in flames for the sake of dragons? Roland laughed heartily. "Rest assured, I am well aware of the unparalleled achievements of His Majesty, the Targaryen king, and I hold them in the highest regard. His guidance over the Seven Kingdoms is indeed a blessing." Baron shrugged, unfazed by Roland's sarcasm, noting that the Storm's End folk were not particularly fond of the Targaryen dynasty. "Of course, I've mentioned before. My father often spoke of the two grave mistakes he made in his lifetime, both occurring within these very walls. The first was responding to the Targaryen summons to this cursed place, a decision that nearly cost him his life. The second was fighting for the usurper Robert in the summer hall, during a time when Robert paraded about in triumph." Baron continued in his mocking tone. "Initially, there was much indecision. The Mad King commanded Jon Arryn to surrender Robert and Ned, only for Robert to flee back to Storm's End like a beaten dog. He promised us numerous benefits for fighting on his behalf, and my father, believing wholeheartedly in the valor of House Baratheon, was convinced of it. After all, we still had a dozen acres of farmland. It wasn't a total loss." Roland interjected with a jest. "Had it not been for the Mad King throwing open the gates to allow the Lannisters' entry, we might have faced defeat. Thus we do not blame the lion for reaping what we had sown." However, Robert should never have used those mere acres of farmland to humiliate us. Upon returning from King's Landing, my father fell gravely ill, his spirit diminished. In that moment, I pledged to the old and new gods that Robert would pay for this transgression. Roland glanced up at Balan, gently shaking his head. The seeds of resentment had already grown into towering trees within Balan's heart. He believed both sides bore fault, for who could tame the willful wind's fury? Yet, it had afforded Roland a relatively favorable space to develop. Buzz. Suddenly, a sound erupted in Roland's mind. For a fleeting moment, his consciousness blurred, clarity washed over him. And then he returned to normal, as if nothing had changed, yet something felt different. My lord, what troubles you? Balan inquired with concern, observing Roland's dazed expression. Roland remained silent, fixated on a stone slab not far away, sensing that it would bring him good fortune. It was an absurd conviction, yet he felt it deeply. He approached and lightly stepped upon it. A muted scraping sound resonated beneath his foot, and a large section of ground began to shift backward, revealing a staircase leading underground. The entrance to the passage was shrouded in darkness, resembling the gaping maw of a ferocious beast. Roland and Balan exchanged glances. The chilling air emanating from the dark descent seeming to drop the temperature with each step. Chapter 12, Dragon Eggs, Gems. Summer Hall of Storm's End. Roland and Balan looked at each other, uncertainty etched on their faces. Let us not act rashly, Balan exclaimed as he saw Roland bend down to investigate. I'll call for help. My lord, please wait here a moment. No, it shall be just the two of us. Roland was acutely aware of the spies, the little birds, and their capacity for intelligence gathering, uncertain if any might be lurking nearby. These little birds were a group of children, tongues severed to prevent secrets from leaking. They were trained in arithmetic, literacy, and shorthand, only deemed competent after undergoing this rigorous process. Roland regarded his previous inexplicable sensation as a form of foresight. Otherwise, he could not explain the mysterious state he had just experienced. Had his golden finger activated? He felt a surge of delight, sensing that the secret passage concealed treasures within. Disturbing too many would risk exposure. In his culture, it was paramount to keep wealth discreet. The staircase alone descended for hundreds of steps, leading them further into the unseen depths, as though they were gradually stepping into hell. Finally, upon reaching the bottom and stepping onto solid ground, they found themselves in a straight corridor. Their figures merged seamlessly with the surrounding darkness, the only sounds being their footsteps echoing against the walls, colliding and rebounding. What is this place? I've never heard you mention it before. The pitch-black corridor, seemingly endless, filled Roland with an overwhelming sense of oppression. Was there truly not a single lamp along this path? Baron continued his leisurely pace ahead of Roland, appearing far less anxious than before, jesting. Can it be that our Griffin lord is afraid of the dark? Roland remained silent, his gaze fixed on the ground as he walked. This place had once served as the summer palace of the Targaryens, presumably constructed by them, yet it seemed that only we had ventured here. One must admit, my lord is indeed fortunate. A mere step has unlocked a secret passage. Baron covered his mouth with one hand, waving the other dismissively. It reeks. Were it not for the Targaryens possibly hiding something within, I would have no desire to enter. We are nearly there, Roland reassured him. The chill grew more intense. The solid and dry ground beneath their feet began to soften and dampen. After several more minutes of walking, the terrain finally opened up. We have arrived. Baron halted, igniting a torch with a quick puff, and instantly, the surroundings illuminated. Before them lay a circular chamber. One end faced the direction they had come from, while the other led into a cave, its entrance barred by iron bars. The light around it was completely absorbed, rendering it a dark void, with several skeletal remains nearby. However, it was certain that the increasingly frigid air they had encountered emanated from this very cave. The cold air gushed forth, forming a thin layer of ice upon the ground, extending all the way to the hexagonal statue within the chamber. Surrounding the chamber were four peculiar stone pillars, while in the center stood a human-like statue, angular and seemingly clad in armor, with enormous wings partially unfurled on its back, forming a slight arch. Its left hand grasped a colossal sword, its tip directed towards the ground ahead. The chamber's darkness made it difficult to discern details clearly. The surface of the pillars was not smooth, but intricately carved with unknown patterns, reminiscent of the cloud motifs found on ancient pedestals. These pillars resembled ancient totems, enveloped in an air of mystery. The slate walls were not barren but adorned with various engravings depicting mountains, rivers, beasts, and jungles. Yet the forms did not resemble commonly seen flora, exuding an exotic aura, as if portraying a scene from a distant land. The artistic style was archaic, with robust lines akin to ancient rock paintings. My lord, look. There is a line of text above, Baron pointed out. The characters seemed to share the same hue as the sword held by the statue. They were indeed difficult to notice at first glance. Roland stepped closer to examine the inscriptions, but found himself at a loss. It resembled oracle bone script, suggesting it was not the common tongue of Westeros. Try pulling out the sword from the statue, he instructed. Baron complied, stepping forward and firmly placing his right foot on the stone beneath the statue for stability. Then yanking the sword free with force. With a resounding crash, a mechanism beneath the statue was activated, revealing a sparkling emerald, roughly the size of a human fist. More beautiful than sunlight reflected upon green leaves. Roland could feel the frigid touch of the gem, yet within it flickered a flame of emerald green, alongside a golden dragon egg. This is a dragon egg, Roland said hoarsely. Baron paused for a moment, then circled the egg several times before turning back to Roland with an incredulous expression and asking, "My lord, what is this? A dragon egg? Baron, I believe we have struck fortune. Have you ever seen such a thing? In such a grotesque place, there exists such exquisite jewelry and a dragon egg." Although Roland spoke thus, he could not suppress his joy, for his foresight suggested that the emerald was even more valuable than the dragon egg. Lacking Targaryen blood, he knew he could not hatch a dragon. It would be tasteless to consume, yet regrettable to discard. Baron surveyed their surroundings, and Roland sensed his trembling. What could this place have been? It holds a solemn, sacred aura, yet also exudes a sense of malevolence. This must be a secret site of the evil church. Roland drew the sword coiled at his waist and began to chip away at the stone surrounding the gem. Its verdant hue was astonishing, reminiscent of the tender green life sprouting in spring. "My lord, please hurry. This place feels truly ominous." Baron's voice trembled with fear. After setting down his sword, Roland was startled to find his own hands shaking. He looked at Baron and noticed his face had turned pale, his large eyes wide with alarm. Baron felt the weight of Roland's gaze and licked his dry lips. "Terrifying, isn't it?" Roland rasped. "I have fought in numerous battles along the borders and witnessed horrors on the brink of death, but compared to this, those were mere trifles. What is happening? I would rather engage in battle than remain here for even a second longer. You hold the dragon egg. Once you extract the gem, we shall leave." Roland too felt the malignancy of the place, yet as he spoke, his hands continued to move. With a resounding chime, the gem was freed. And the moment Roland grasped it, he collapsed, feeling as if the gem had drained him of all vitality. Roland's weary eyes slowly closed. His grip on the gem grew rigid, yet he refused to release it, clutching it with every ounce of strength. In that fleeting moment before darkness enveloped him, he heard Baron's heart-wrenching scream. "Shout all you like. I am not dead," was Roland's final thought before losing consciousness. Chapter 13. The flames of war rekindled. Black Harbor City. Black Harbor City nestled amid the mountains, a fortress crafted by the finest stonemasons from across the continent of Westeros. Though not vast, it boasted numerous stone towers and arrow towers, each building's entrance equipped with a narrow portal. Should enemies breach the castle, defending these small entrances would allow a single man to hold back a multitude. The principal structure within the fortress, the palace, served as a bastion of residence and defense. Its walls adorned with battlements, and every window transformed into a shooting aperture for archers, overlooking every corner of the castle from its elevated vantage. Beneath the castle, the sentinels stand vigilant, while the common folk within the fortress busily toil for their livelihoods. The distant peal of church bells softly reverberates in the air, painting a serene tableau of this domain. Occasionally, bandits emerge from the mountains, yet they are swiftly apprehended by the knights of House Targaryen, who execute them and display their lifeless bodies at crossroads as a grim warning to others. On a stormy night long ago, a messenger of the Storm King was ambushed by two Dornishmen. The messenger's steed fell victim to an arrow, while his sword shattered in the fray. In his moment of despair, a brilliant purple lightning bolt descended, striking down the assailants. The messenger managed to deliver crucial information on time, earning him a noble title from the Storm King, thus marking the genesis of House Targaryen. This ancient lineage remains loyal to Storm's End, situated near Dorne, while Black Harbor controls the vital routes leading into Dornish territory. The Targaryen sigil features a forked purple lightning bolt against a black field, accompanied by several twinkling four-pointed stars. In the Hall of Audience, a knight recounted the conflict between Clinton and Tyrell, holding a parchment in his hands. Opposite him, two nobles listened intently at the grand table. The unexpected peace between Clinton and Tyrell astonished Barrett Targaryen. Upon receiving the news, the young earl gazed in disbelief at the parchment delivered from White Willow, which succinctly described the situation there. Was Roland Clinton gravely injured and in a state of unconsciousness? Barrett Targaryen's dark brows knitted tightly as he scrutinized the knight before him, adorned with a pointed iron helm and gleaming chainmail, his surcoat emblazoned in vivid colors. No, he must be ill or poisoned. The knight reported to Barrett Targaryen that he had merely glimpsed Roland being carefully carried by a group, while his army hastily retreated to Eagle's Nest through the rain. How unexpected it was that Clinton ventured so far into enemy territory, yet managed to return alive. Standing nearby, Earl Briss Carlin crossed his arms, his expression equally incredulous. The Carlin family's dominion lies at Night's Song, bordering Dorne, and they owe fealty to Storm's End. They bear the title of Warden of the Marches, denoting their position as lords over other border territories. Their stronghold, Night's Song, stands resolutely at the northern end of the Dornish Pass, a bastion of defense. The Carlin lineage traces back to the Age of Heroes, renowned for producing warriors and singers. They claim their nightingale crest has graced 1,000 battles. Yet, for kingdoms once existed in the Riverlands, one of which ruled from the Horns to the western borders of Night's Song. Both the Carlin and Swan families assert their claim as the oldest lords of the Marches. Have you pondered what gifts to bring? Roland Connington will demand our submission, his honeyed words laced with veiled threats. I must first ride forth, then take my litter, accompanied by hundreds of knights and the esteemed friends of House Targaryen, extending our warmest greetings beneath the Lion Griffin banner. If you were to inquire whether I would wish for such a child to lead me, my response would undoubtedly be in the negative. Betrothal sat upon a wooden chair, devoid of any chainmail or armor, clad in a flowing black linen robe, cinched at the waist with a leather belt adorned with a myriad of gemstones. Whispering softly to Briskelin, a gift? He ought to be bestowed with hundreds of swords, wielded by valiant knights, to partake in a grand spectacle of blood and fire. Observing Betrothal silence, Briskelin approached the chair on the left side of the long table and seated himself upon the wooden bench, resting his arms upon the table. We cannot continue in this manner. We have been isolated. Do you not comprehend? While he remains in a stupor, we must strike decisively. I have no desire to be ruled by a mere child. Who does he think he is? A Targaryen? He should bring dragons before us to breathe fire. Briskelin bore an unruly expression, convinced that Clinton could not vanquish them. When Briskelin initially sought to meddle in Clinton's affairs, he was harshly humiliated by Roland, which left him incensed. In the recent conflict with Tyrell, Briskelin refused to deploy troops. What does that young lad think of himself? He had intended to watch the farce of the Stark and Clinton families from a distance, but was taken aback and compelled to reassess the threat posed by his eastern neighbor. Have we truly arrived at this juncture? Betrothal rasped, his voice hoarse, his face drawn and haggard. At the time of the incident, he had been in King's Landing, and on his journey back to Blackport. He had been caught in the rain, causing a fever to rise upon his brow and his throat to swell with pain. He realized he had caught a cold. Very well. If the young Clinton seeks to play the adversary, I do not mind awakening him, as long as we act with integrity. He cannot employ the tactics of a Targaryen conqueror without dragons. Betrothal stated, I trust you will provide an honest response. As a knight and a priest ought to be true to their hearts. Yet, dear brother, heed my counsel. Manage your tongue and your hands with care, speak courteously, and conduct yourself with honor. The habits you forged among the Dornish captives and thieves will not serve you here. Clinton is not to be trifled with. Should you offend him gravely, he will not let it rest. Enough with your discourse, Briskelin retorted. I assure you I shall maintain the necessary restraint in this conflict, acting with the grace of a maiden. Tend to your health, and leave the remainder to me. Let us hope matters do not deteriorate to such an extent, my lord. Do you hear? This endeavor shall be under his command. Betrothal coughed several times, gazing at the knight beneath the main table. In the name of the 7 gods, let us swear this is our duty. The knight promptly knelt on one knee, hand pressed against his chest, his heart racing with anxiety. The sound of his chainmail clinking in response. Chapter 14 The Onset of War Storm Eagle's Nest. This hall is exceedingly long and wide, yet strikingly low, creating a rather incongruous atmosphere. At its center stands a rough-hewn oak table, its planks crudely cut directly from the forest, scarcely planed, already adorned with a sumptuous dinner. The ceiling, save for the beams and rafters covered with a layer of wooden planks and thatch, offers no separation from the heavens above. At either end of the hall, there looms a grand fireplace, though the chimney's rudimentary structure allows as much smoke to infiltrate the interior as escapes into the outside air. Under the relentless onslaught of smoke, the low ceilings of this hall have become enshrouded in a layer of dark soot. Adorning the walls are implements of warfare and hunting, while at each corner, 2 folding doors provide access to the various chambers of this expansive residence. The floor is a mixture of earth and lime, with one end, occupying about a quarter of the hall's length, elevated above the rest, serving as a dais for the lord or esteemed guests. For this purpose, a table draped in opulent crimson cloth is placed upon the raised platform. However, aside from the noble Roland, no other distinguished individuals would deign to share a meal with a bastard, Green Storm Riley mused. A longer, lower table extends from the center of the dais to the hall's far end, designated for those of lesser status. Together, these tables form a T-shape, a configuration that Green had surreptitiously adopted from Eagle's Nest. Upon the dais rests a set of ornately carved oak chairs and backed benches, beneath a canopy that offers some protection from the wind and rain for those seated here, for this rudimentary structure is prone to leaks in certain areas. Indeed, the appearance of this illegitimate son reveals him to be an honest man, albeit with a somewhat irritable and insecure temperament. He possesses an average stature, yet broad shoulders and long arms lend him a robust physique, reminiscent of one accustomed to the labors of war or hunting. A scar, the width of a finger, mars his face, framed by long black hair that parts at the crown and forehead, cascading down to his shoulders. His large brown eyes reflect a temperate demeanor, and his well-aligned teeth suggest a disposition of loyalty. However, his frequent bouts of insecurity and brooding are evident in his gaze, and the scar on his face adds a sinister touch, leading others to perceive him as grim and cruel, making them reluctant to engage with him. The fireplace crackles with a roaring flame, while beneath the table, numerous guests sip weak ale and engage in conversation. In the warmth of the hall, a drink and a serving of bear meat can alleviate the tedium of a cold, dreary night. The guests are primarily soldiers and farmers, with a few wandering mercenaries among them. Aside from these, few are willing to associate with the bastard. Please fetch me some spicy soup that may induce a sweat, Green instructed the maid beside him, hoping to warm his frigid heart. He stood before Roland's house for 2 days and nights without daring to close his eyes. Although the scholar assured him that the master was merely in a deep slumber for reasons unknown, his trust in the scholar was tenuous at best. Yet, a command from Redmond Clinton was enough to compel him, weary as he was, to return home. Green understood the reason. As a bastard son, he was denied the trust of anyone but Roland. His goodwill was often misinterpreted as ulterior motives, though he had endeavored to prove himself as a reliable and loyal individual. He was met with heightened suspicion, leading him to a state of resignation. While he comprehended why Redmond would send him home, he could not shake the suffocating weight in his chest. Just as he prepared to indulge in drink, the sound of hooves reached his left ear, prompting him to set down his goblet. He beheld 4 soldiers illuminated by the torchlight at his doorstep, dismounting swiftly to hand their reins to the young maid before hastening into the room. "Sir, we have encountered a peculiar situation," one soldier whispered urgently in Green's ear. "Initially, we suspected a great fire, but I require your presence to investigate further." The once boisterous room, filled with laughter and clinking glasses, fell into a hush as guests held their breath, noting the transformation of Green's expression from dazed to grim. Nodding at the soldier, Green grasped his sword and exited the chamber, striding through the bustling, chaotic market toward the archery range. He was aware that much lay ahead. Approaching Baron, who was practicing his archery, rather than standing behind him, an unusual choice that mirrored his heightened emotions. He gazed intently at the Baron, observing his poised stance akin to a spear. Noticing Green's presence, Baron did not turn, continuing his task as if nothing had changed. "Baron, I fear we may have encountered trouble," Green began. "Listen, Green. I have explained this numerous times. I may have insight into the cause of the master's coma, but I believe he would prefer that the fewer who know of this secret, the better, including you," Baron replied, still focused on his bow. "If you've come running to me to lament your woes, understand that I am not the waste pit of your household. You may indulge in your drinking or wallowing, but if you seek solace here, you are mistaken. I am not discussing that matter," Green persisted, carefully choosing his words. "My soldiers reported signs of troop movement 50 miles away. They suspect someone is mobilizing forces towards Eagle's Nest Castle, and I wish for you to accompany me to investigate." Baron lowered his bow, turning to meet Green's clear brown eyes, feeling the intensity of that unwavering gaze. After a moment's hesitation, he nodded in agreement. They then made their way to the site indicated by the soldiers, gazing upon the undulating hills and the dense pines of the western woods. A frown creased Green's brow. Something felt amiss. Unable to discern the issue immediately, he refrained from alerting Baron and continued to survey the horizon. The northern sky was shrouded in an unprecedented density of dark clouds, from which gray columns of smoke ascended toward the heavens. Green clutched Baron's arm, directing his gaze northward. Initially, Baron discerned nothing, but soon he beheld the black smoke spiraling into the sky. His thick brows knitted in concern. Campfires, Baron remarked. Thousands of them, Green continued. A portent of war. Such a sight could only herald an entire army encamped. But whose army is it? For what purpose? What are their targets? Baron felt incredulous, yet no one would enlighten him. The air was suffused with the unmistakable scent of impending conflict. Chapter 15. The War of the Bastard, Part 1. An unnamed village near the storm eagle's nest at the moment when the blue moon ascended to meet the white moon in the summer sky. Raiders from the west launched a surprise attack on this obscure village, recognizable even to the unknowing peasants as elite cavalry. The timing was impeccably orchestrated, though the reasons behind it would remain unfathomable in hindsight. Perhaps it was merely a capricious whim, but the ensuing tragedy could hardly be described as such. At least 50 horsemen swiftly encircled the wooden palisades surrounding the village's homes and barns, some breaking through the walls while others vaulted over. Approximately 20 households resided here. Equipped with a few old swords, a handful of rusted spears, several mules, a single cow, and 3 horses. The villagers attempted to resist. The village chief, wielding a longbow, appeared formidable, yet he was the first to meet his demise. As he trembled while drawing his bow, a charging horseman pierced him through with a lance. The cavalryman thrust his spear into the chief's chest, sending the lifeless body crashing against the palisade behind him. His wife foolishly screamed from inside their home. Upon hearing her, the rider dismounted and stepped into the low dwelling, loosening his belt as he bent through the small door. Numerous houses quickly ignited, and the communal barn was set ablaze. With its stores of wheat, the structure was particularly vulnerable in the midsummer heat. Flames erupted in an instant, likely visible even from the distant eagle's nest. Wilbur, who cherished sleeping atop the barn in summer, managed to leap down just in time. The barn lay at one end of the village, while the mill and stream were situated at the opposite end. Thus, he did not witness the brutal murder of the village chief or the cavalryman invading the home of his pregnant mother and 2 sisters. Wilbur was 14 this year. Had he witnessed the scene, he might have attempted to confront the assailants with bare hands, though it could have cost him his life. For now, he merely found himself awkwardly sprawled at the feet of a cackling knight, who was using the back of his sword to herd the surviving villagers. Despairing, Wilbur scanned his surroundings, seeking his family amidst the thick smoke. He noted that the survivors were few, barely around 20, in a village that had once harbored over 40 souls. Yet, in the suffocating smoke, clarity was elusive. The village was being devoured by flames, a hellish inferno. For the raiders, this venture was somewhat disappointing. Unsurprisingly, there was no one here worth ransoming, thus denying them any potential profit. Even the brief skirmish seemed absurdly inconsequential. The pitiable farmers were no match for these marauders, who could even derive no training benefit from them. While there were indeed women in the village, they had not endured the sweltering heat and long treks for mere amusement with a few rustic ladies. It was only when someone suggested that the surviving men engage the women in a so-called game that this belated form of entertainment sparked their interest. Indeed, another shouted, advocating for the vial to be nailed to their own wooden beams, proposing a similar fate for the women. Amidst the chaotic inferno, the plunderers began to efficiently gather wooden beams to construct a scaffold, finally presenting an opportunity for diversion that night. They had brought numerous nails to secure the stolen horses, but these would also serve to affix the men to the wooden frame. The marauders selected the first farmer, an unsuspecting soul who could never have imagined he would find himself bound to a scaffold. Just then, a piercing cry of warning shattered the air, but alas, it was too late. A band of riders surged into the village with lightning speed, deftly navigating the surrounding flames while brandishing their swords. Most of the marauders had dismounted, some having laid down their weapons to construct the very apparatus meant to condemn these villagers. In that moment, they were no more than feeble prey, akin to the villagers they had just hunted down. However, these marauders hailed from noble knightly stock, not the filthy rabble of common brigands. They knew how to navigate such tumult, even amidst the tempest. The plight of the farmers was one matter, a common tale across the 7 kingdoms. Yet, the wealthy and powerful represented an entirely different narrative. Throughout the small village, the plunderers raised their hands in surrender, chanting the well-known refrain, "Ransom, ransom." Those who fell to the initial charge surely perished in shock. Who could have foreseen such a turn of events? Yet, had they discerned the identity of their assailants before their demise, their astonishment would surely have been compounded by terror. Of course, the dead would never know. In due course, the marauders were herded into the open grassy expanse at the heart of the village. During this time, some of the men under the command of the Stormbringer filled buckets from the stream, attempting alongside some villagers to quench the flames, though such efforts proved futile. as even the inexperienced could discern the futility of their labors. Upon witnessing a significant military operation near Eagle's Nest, Gregor hurriedly spurred his steed, eager to return to Clinton with the news. However, en route, he stumbled upon a village engulfed in flames, and the scene before him ignited a profound fury within him. Gregor gazed upon the brown-haired leader of the cavalry, who removed a glove and stroked his beard while mounted on a black horse. Casting a disdainful glance upon the man who had wrought destruction upon the village, the man stood on the ground, stout and dark-skinned, seemingly unperturbed by the prospect of imminent death. "I've heard of your bastards," he declared with astonishing arrogance to Gregor's soldiers. "Do you even comprehend the nature of those you've slain?" From the perspective of men, his voice was high-pitched, almost shrill. "Once I report this matter to the Iron Throne, do you know what the consequences will be?" As Green was about to respond, a soldier suddenly whispered in his ear about the fate of the children's mother, a woman on the brink of childbirth. They thrust a sword into her body from below and pulled it out with force, leaving her to bleed to death. By the time I arrived, the infant had already slipped from the wound, its head nearly cleaved in two by that very sword before even seeing the light of day. Upon hearing this, Green was overcome with nausea. "Who did this?" he demanded, raising his voice towards the brutes before him. Suddenly, a boy stepped forward, bewildered, asking, "Do you know who did it?" Wilbur, pale as death, nodded slightly, and Green instructed the soldier to give him a sword. However, the soldiers exchanged glances. While the actions of these nobles were repugnant, they would have complied had it been Roland Clinton. But it was evident that a bastard would not be able to secure their loyalty, and they hesitated. "Damn it, I command you to give him a sword. I alone will bear the consequences." Wilbur slowly rose and took the long sword with deliberate care. Green observed, suspecting that tonight would likely be his first taste of battle. The blade was stained with blood. "Consider what you are doing, Green," he thought. "You will regret this. Clinton won't protect you, you wretched bastard." The brown-haired leader suddenly shrieked, his voice hoarse. "This is commonplace in war and plunder. Don't pretend you are above it." "War?" Green abruptly interrupted. "What war? Who is fighting? Who ordered the plunder? Tell me." Green did not wait for the boy to slay his enemy. He ordered the soldiers to execute the brutes, and he relished their cries of anguish. The crackling flames surrounding them echoed ominously. The malevolent crimson glow dimmed the stars and obscured the twin moons. Green heard the sounds of weeping, a heart-wrenching lament emanating from the shadows at the edge of the fire. "May the seven gods forgive your sins, and may your souls find rest in the radiance of the Holy Mother." Chapter 16, The War of the Bastards, Part 2. Eyrie Castle. When Green returned to Eyrie Castle, it was already late at night, and he hurried to find Raymond, who was deep in slumber. He was well acquainted with Raymond. Upon waking, Raymond inquired about Green's activities on the road. Green reported that, after receiving a soldier's report, he and Baron went to investigate and witnessed a large-scale military assembly. He then recounted the cruel and foolish actions of the Caron family. Considering that Roland was still unconscious and that Raymond had never experienced war or seen blood, Green refrained from emphasizing the gravity of the situation too much, lest he frighten the boy. However, the outcome was disappointing. Green advocated for a direct confrontation. For the Clinton family's enterprises, such as the winery and perfumery, were located in the nearby villages. It was likely that Roland himself had not anticipated that Eyrie Castle would be swept clean by his own kin, and most of the families of the castle's direct legion resided in the nearby villages. If not handled properly, a mutiny could easily occur. Caron had seized upon this point to compel Clinton to confront them directly. However, Raymond contended that the protection of those village farmers was not Clinton's responsibility, as the lands had been granted to others following the defeat in the last usurpers' war, rendering them not Clinton's property and thus not worth the effort to safeguard. Redwyn questioned whether those jars and vessels could rival the significance of a family legacy spanning millennia, believing that they should fortify Eagle's Nest Castle and await the arrival of friends for rescue. Green and Raymond found themselves unable to persuade one another, resulting in a discordant parting. Roland held great regard for these jars and vessels. Even the slightest presence of a thief would warrant severe punishment as a deterrent. Yet, Raymond's apparent indifference frustrated him greatly. After all, he was merely a bastard and not of the Clinton name, which left him powerless to impose decisions on Raymond. He even pondered whether, in the absence of Roland's awakening, Raymond would possess the charisma to rally their friends, the outcome of which remained uncertain. Green discerned Raymond's palpable fear. Indeed, in battle, all must risk their lives, a notion that, for a noble, regardless of age, could be viewed as a commendable fate. Furthermore, for the young man, war was neither novel nor foreign. Although still a youth, he had acquired knowledge of combat, whether mounted or on foot, employing spear, axe, dagger, longsword, throwing spear, or engaging in hand-to-hand combat. Nevertheless, he remained apprehensive. Green contemplated bypassing Raymond to muster troops against the enemy. As a Griffin knight personally trained by Roland and the chief instructor of the troops directly under Eagle's Nest Castle, he faced a limited number of knights to command, as most of the soldiers lacked noble status. In the hearts of the people, knights were always perceived as valiant, honorable, loyal to their lord, and steadfast in their beliefs. They were expected to remain faithful to their feudal lords and fight for their convictions. In reality, however, many knights did not embody such nobility. Numerous knights had never contemplated practicing the chivalric ideals, viewing their title merely as a means for speculation and social climbing. To some extent, such circumstances were inevitable and understandable. For bastards and commoners, the path ahead was exceedingly narrow, and becoming a knight represented one of the few avenues to elevate their social standing and wealth. With oaths binding them only lightly, allowing for marriage, offspring, and inheritance of lands. On the other hand, regarding the knightly title itself, the risks and costs far exceeded the benefits, yet it simultaneously presented vast opportunities. Though Clinton had been stripped of his title as earl, he remained a landed knight, signifying one who resides in a castle and possesses estates. Under their dominion were farmers and soldiers, some even commanding the allegiance of sworn knights loyal to them. With a troubled heart, Green approached the exterior of Eagle's Nest Castle, where a training camp lay. Nearby, anxious young nobles and knights awaited, and upon sighting Green walking alone, they stirred restlessly. At the forefront stood Sir Gerald Gall, adorned with a high-crowned helmet and a well-crafted leather armor inlaid with metal plates, a sword hanging at his waist. He stood upright, eagerly anticipating news from Green, but as he noticed the emptiness behind him, a wave of anxiety and disappointment washed over him. "Sir Green," Gerald Gall exclaimed, adjusting his armor before striding forward to bow before Green's horse. Although he had surmised Clinton's stance, he yearned to hear the outcome firsthand. "Undoubtedly, Lord Raymond has resolved to hold steadfast at Eagle's Nest," Green declared. "Damn Raymond! It cannot be," cried one among them. "Clinton would never abandon us. Lord Roland would not allow such a thing to happen." Upon hearing Green's announcement, despair rippled through the crowd, igniting fervent discussions. "We must engage in a fight for our very survival. Our homes, families, and friends are at stake," Gerald Gall insisted, fixing his gaze upon Green. "If we do not crush them, they will seek our annihilation." "Indeed," Green bellowed from the platform, silencing the previously raucous training ground. As time passed, various rumors began to circulate. Reports of those who volunteered for Clinton being captured, villages set ablaze, and farmers taken prisoner. Chilling tales of the dreadful Briscoeland emerging victorious against near-certain doom also spread. Yet, could we kneel in submission? No, we shall not. We must pillage in retaliation, set fires in vengeance, slay in retribution, and invade with ferocity. Damn Raymond! No one shall thwart our defense of home. The knights had heard the detailed accounts from soldiers returning with Green, recounting the plundering of the Kalan family's villages, which only fueled their indignation towards Raymond. They did not merely harbor these thoughts, they spoke them aloud. He is a coward, incapable of stepping onto the battlefield. Were it not for his brother Lord Roland, we would have cast him into the storm. May the seven gods ensure his demise. Thus, Green commanded loudly, we have suffered the same losses and share the same enemies. To win this war, we must rally every man capable of wielding a sword. Be it spear, axe, dagger, or longsword, as long as you can fight. We shall slaughter those scoundrels of Kalan as one would a sheep. Green surveyed the bloodthirsty crowd below, his emotions tumultuous. Should they view his actions through a lens of bias, they might see him as a traitor to Clinton. However, he believed his course of action to be just. He had once contemplated that no amount of land, livestock, or any other enticements would ever sway him to abandon the humble wooden cabin bestowed upon him by Roland. He would follow Roland to the ends of the earth. If, in the future, Roland were to hold him accountable, he merely hoped that the sword would be sharpened, granting him a swift conclusion. Chapter 17. The War of the Bastards, Part 2. In the dead of night, Green and Gerald Gall embarked on their journey. Accompanied by nearly 1,000 cavalrymen, 3,000 robust young men, 500 elderly men still capable of wielding swords, and 500 mercenaries. This contingent comprised nearly all the able-bodied men in the vicinity of Eagle's Nest Fortress. The long procession, illuminated by torches, traversed the night, with each individual cloaked to shield against the biting cold. The thunderous sound of hooves and footsteps resonated through the earth, instilling fear in the villagers as they passed through their hamlets. As they approached the camp, the surrounding woods remained shrouded in darkness. Here, they slowed their horses to a leisurely pace, allowing the steeds to rest while minimizing noise. "We require a feigned attack," Green declared, scratching the scar on his face. "We must instill panic in them, diverting their attention from their surroundings. For instance, we could set a fire. If a stranger were to enter and ignite a blaze, it would undoubtedly alarm them." Gerald Gall spoke in a hushed tone, revealing his nervousness as it was his first time on the battlefield. "This must be done discreetly. Need I say more?" Green replied impatiently. "You should strike while they are having breakfast. I refuse to believe that they would don armor and wield swords while tending to their meals. Ensure your men stoke the flames fiercely. There is no better opportunity for a surprise assault." The dawn arrived slowly, its lethargy unnerving. Green felt an overwhelming tension, as this was his inaugural foray into battle. The incident at White Poplar Marsh had hardly been a skirmish. Throughout the night, he and Gerald had meticulously detailed their basic plan. Yet numerous variables could lead to failure. The cavalry, due to the forest's intricate pathways, would need to lead their horses out before charging, a process that required time. Otherwise, proximity might lead to their discovery. If they were detected or if suspicions arose, their ambush could be thwarted or they could be captured before they even commenced their assault. Even if all plans materialized, a confrontation awaited. This would be Green's first true large-scale war. Casualties would ensue, and he might very well be among the unfortunate. Having gone 2 days and nights without rest, he longed to close his eyes and indulge in a peaceful slumber, yet he prepared himself for the battlefield. Green remained uncertain of how he would face Roland or whether the nobleman had regained consciousness. Nonetheless, dying in battle could be deemed a fitting end, provided victory was achieved. Aside from the cavalry, a group gradually approached the camp, crouching beneath the trees, their eyes keenly fixed on the encampment, less than a kilometer away. In silent anticipation, they observed the clusters of tents arranged like a slanted line of white, quivering in the distance, emanating an atmosphere of somber foreboding. The air felt oppressive. "So many," murmured the farmers, their voices trembling, their gazes somewhat vacant. As individuals accustomed solely to tilling the land, witnessing such a vast assembly of thousands was unprecedented. Particularly striking were the elongated, quadrilateral banners fluttering in the morning mist, resembling a dense thicket of flagpoles standing resolute against the gusting winds. Yet retreat was not an option. The noble lords had warned the peasants that these men came to plunder, and if they faltered, they would be left without fields to cultivate. Forced to wander with their families into a life of begging or thievery, a calamity for any farmer. Green fixed his gaze upon the camp, harboring his own reservations. He had brought only 1,000 cavalry from the direct forces of Eagle's Nest Fortress, leaving over 2,000 behind, for he lacked confidence in securing victory. Should defeat befall him, he hoped the remaining troops could endure until reinforcements arrived. "Charge! Slay these wretches!" As the chaos unfolded in the camp, Green pointed his sword and rallied his comrades, igniting a frenzy among them. Leading the charge, he raised his sword high, plunging it into the chest of a soldier stationed at the camp's entrance, striding into the smoky battlefield and lunging towards the advancing enemy like a wave. The enemy surged forth, soldiers wielding axes and blades clashed violently, leaving a trail of anguish in their wake. Their piercing cries filled the air as a mercenary beneath Green's feet drove his dagger into an enemy's jaw, silencing the torment. Ambush! A chorus of anguished screams erupted from within the camp, resonating with despair and fury. "What is happening? Steady yourselves. Do not panic," Bryce Garland shouted. Observing the frantic movements of his soldiers, Green swung his sword with fervor, severing an enemy soldier's left hand, then kicking him down. Ignoring the soldier's cries, Green stepped onto his chest, driving his sword straight into the throat, blood gushing onto Green's face as he turned to engage another foe. He noticed his comrade, Gerard, struggling against the enemy, clearly at a disadvantage. Green hastened to his side, thrusting his sword from behind into the chest of an enemy soldier. Surrounding him were cries of agony and the clamor of battle echoing in his ears. With a grunt, Green felt a blade slice across his back. He turned, using the tip of his sword to fend off the assailant, then swiftly struck, the blade cracking against bone. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw another enemy approaching from the right and instinctively swung his sword, severing the enemy's arm, while the blade grazed their cheek, blood erupting from their mouth. He and his comrades fought desperately, having lost the chance to pause for breath. The enemy, having recovered from their earlier assault, began to overwhelm them, and the harrowing screams faded beneath the thunderous roars of battle. Green tightened his grip on his sword, anxiously scanning the surroundings, yearning for a shift in fortune. Yet, deep down, he understood that the fate of defeat was irrevocable. He was shrouded in the shadows of self-reproach, feeling unworthy to face Roland. He realized that, with the dawn, he and his companions would undoubtedly perish on this scorched earth. The enemy before him proved relentless. Despite their valiant efforts, they could not escape the clutches of defeat. The enemy numbers swelled. Gerard anxiously observed the relentless tide of foes. These enemy warriors were formidable, far beyond the capabilities of their peasant ranks. Even as comrades fell, wailing in agony, it failed to shake the resolve of the advancing adversaries. Prepare to retreat. A heavy despair settled on Green's heart as he hurriedly scanned his surroundings. Spotting Gerard nearby, gravely wounded and struggling to breathe. In Green's eyes, anxiety and remorse were equally evident. The two stood shoulder to shoulder, confronting the relentless onslaught of the enemy's soldiers, retreating gradually to a relatively safer location. Suddenly, a cohort of thundering cavalry charged into the camp, with one of them casually severing the flag of the Caron family. The earth groaned beneath the many pounding hooves, and upon closer inspection, Green realized it was the banner of the Griffin. Long live the Griffin! The front line of cavalry erupted in a thunderous battle cry as they surged into the fray, sending enemy soldiers flying far and wide. The disorganized and panicked retreat of the enemy had rendered them utterly defenseless. In the midst of the chaos, they encountered a well-rested cavalry unit launching a coordinated charge from the ground, and even a fool could predict the outcome. Even if they were not crushed by the heavy warhorses, they would surely be trampled into oblivion by countless hooves. Long live the Griffin! Green shouted as he plunged into the throng, the blood-red sun gradually rising above. Thus, both sides engaged in a deadly struggle, neither willing to yield. The battlefield was strewn with countless corpses, akin to a starry sky. Now, the two factions were locked in a fierce gaze, like two ferocious tigers, until one was ultimately overwhelmed by the other. Chapter 18. Clearing the obstacles storms Eagle Nest Fortress as dawn broke, casting a rosy and golden light upon the earth. The residents of Eagle Nest Fortress awoke to the chimes of bells. Children leaped from their beds and dashed into their parents' chambers, shaking their fathers and mothers awake to usher in this special day, while some parents groaned and pulled the covers over their heads. The majority smiled as they rose from their slumber, sharing their children's eager anticipation. Upon hearing the bells, Roland opened his eyes and instructed a servant to fetch his finest attire. The servant brought a mirror to the bedside, where Roland began to dress. He hurriedly combed his hair, donned a white silk garment embroidered with a golden griffin, secured a golden belt around his waist, and attached a small sword in a gilded ivory scabbard. Each item was new and resplendent, untouched by blood. Some had been purchased from across the narrow sea, while others were spoils of the Caron family. He then put on white trousers and finished with a pair of black boots. Dressed impeccably, he appeared like a pure and noble cleric. After completing his ensemble, he stepped out of the room. As the sun crested the castle walls, smoke began to waft through Eagle Nest Fortress. Soon, the enticing aromas of ham, bread, and fried bacon roused even the most slumberous of souls from their beds. After all, they could not sleep for long. Soon, the streets would be filled with children. On this day, all household and city rules could be temporarily disregarded. The shadow of war over Eagle Nest Fortress had lasted nearly 10 days, but now the children were free to revel for an entire day. By evening, these children would return home with bruised foreheads, scraped knees, and stomachaches from overindulgence. Yet, everyone would remember this splendid day. Baron awaited at the doorway, watching as Roland emerged. "Good day, my lord." "Good day, Baron," Roland nodded. "Is everything in order?" "The matter has been addressed, my lord. Over 100 individuals from Nightingale City and more than 1,200 captured soldiers have been dealt with. Yet, I ponder the consequences should the Iron Throne learn of our actions. We would undoubtedly face execution, our heads displayed for all to see," Baron remarked with a smirk. Roland glanced sideways, a hint of disdain in his gaze. "If blame must indeed be assigned, and we are captured, even if innocent, Robert would not hesitate to have us hanged. I care little for the treatment of my head posthumously." Baron's expression momentarily froze. He licked his lips, parched. "Frankly, this jest lacks any humor." Roland corrected Baron, asserting that it was hardly a jest. "Rest assured, Robert understands right from wrong. Our actions were merely retaliatory, provoked by the enemy's aggression. At worst, we shall bow before the king in King's Landing and proclaim his name a few more times." Baron listened in silence, pondering, gradually freeing himself from his initial resistance to the idea, silently gasping for breath as he began to accept Roland's reasoning. After all, it was not he who bore the burden of infamy and consequence. The exquisite wine, crafted using techniques not of this era, has garnered acclaim across the Seven Kingdoms. Beyond conquering the nobles and the obstinate Dornish, it is said that the arrogant Iron Islanders, aside from their lust for gold and jewels, show interest only in the fine vintages produced at Eagle's Nest, in the court of King's Landing. It is rumored that no grand feast is complete without the renowned Griffin's wine. In addition to the delectable libations, Roland has initiated extensive construction to connect the Rose Road, transforming Eagle's Nest into a bustling hub of commerce, where merchants and travelers abound, reflecting its vibrant activity. Perfumes, soaps, and various trinkets transported across the narrow sea can be found here, also serving as a conduit for goods destined for other markets. As Roland envisions this place becoming a wholesale center for the Seven Kingdoms. However, upon awakening to the news that Karen, in alliance with several other families, had seized some of his factories, Roland felt a surge of fury. From the soldiers, he learned that Green was embroiled in combat and promptly dispatched troops to provide assistance. Upon their return, a cold sweat broke upon Roland, as they had narrowly triumphed. In brisk Karen's understanding, the mountainous terrain surrounding Eagle's Nest necessitated only a small cavalry detachment, which ultimately led to the enemy's rapid demoralization following a cavalry charge, with some surrendering and others fleeing. Brisk Karen was captured alive. Meanwhile, upon seeing the enemy's banner, a black nightingale on a yellow field, Baron hurried back to Stonehelm, leading a surprise attack on the now deserted Nightingale City and escorting Brisk Karen's family and relatives to Eagle's Nest. To prevent any future repercussions, Roland sought to eliminate any lingering threats. Upon learning of the enemy's pillaging of villages, he commanded that all individuals from Nightingale City, along with the 1,300 soldiers involved in the looting, be impaled on wooden stakes at the ruins of their burned village, ignoring their pleas as they awaited their grim fate. In essence, Roland aspires to become the second Tywin, believing that Tywin embodies the essence of wisdom. The Ballad of the Rainy Season in Castamere instills a sense of trepidation in the West, where none dare to touch his beard. As war looms, Tywin remains ensconced in the rear, merely wielding his words rather than charging alongside the army. Yet, he commands fear across the Seven Kingdoms. Roland draws inspiration from him, realizing that governance is not achieved through tender affections, but through a blend of benevolence and authority. He contemplates his actions, yet proceeds with purpose. Today marks a celebration of victory in war, and many soldiers eagerly anticipate the rewards Roland will bestow, knowing his generosity in such matters is boundless. With one hand resting on the hilt of his sword and the other at his side, he stands tall, his head slightly tilted upwards, striding forward with his legs straight, earning the awe-filled gazes of all who pass. The nobles of Storm's End and their retinues are astonished by his meticulous attire. Despite the summer heat, they don their precious leather garments to maintain an air of elegance, yet they cannot help but marvel at Roland's distinctive style, yearning to inquire about the master behind his garments, though etiquette compels them to suppress their curiosity with smiles. As Roland ascends the platform step by step, a demeanor of kindness and solemnity graces his face, akin to one who has fortuitously leaped into an unexpectedly exalted position. He constantly ponders whether his actions align with his dignified status, ever wary of malicious gossip. His expressions and movements bear a hint of impatience. However, as he gazes upon the crowd and the nobility below, he recognizes his triumph. His attire serves as a proclamation of his success. Chapter 19. The Scarecrow Roland Connington, Storm's End. Eagle's Nest. From noon onward, throngs of people encircled Roland, while his guards diligently maintained order. The entire town was filled with citizens, groups of farmers flocking towards the castle, inquiring about the well-being of their beloved lord and the unsettling state of the recent conflicts. At last, Roland emerged from the grand entrance, standing upon the platform amidst the populace, sharing news and bestowing generous rewards upon soldiers and knights. Notably, Greenstorm was publicly granted the surname Clinton, and Roland proclaimed that as a branch of the Clinton lineage, he would fight for the family. His fief now expanded more than tenfold. This revelation sparked jubilant cheers among the farmers, who saw a pathway for their children to nobility through service to the Clintons. Upon hearing this news, hearts brimmed with joy, and the crowd began to disperse, each person eager to express their inner delight. Since shouting was prohibited near the castle, the streets soon became congested, filled with joyous songs and cheers resonating in every corner. Merchants engaged in lively discussions, their happiness amplifying with each passing moment. They hosted feasts in private homes and inns, while the marketplace overflowed with barrels of wine and roasted meats. The entire city pulsated with vitality and exuberance. The sounds of revelry and merriment emanated intermittently from the castle, interspersed with raucous laughter, sporadic screams, and the coarse rhythm of distant melodies. Such cacophony evoked an image of the chaotic and tumultuous state within the castle, teeming with soldiers, nobles, and their debauched retainers. Baron felt a twinge of unease, for he had recently assumed the role of chief instructor at the Griffin's Nest, and the security of the castle rested squarely upon his shoulders. The day's festivities would undoubtedly pose challenges for him. Baron cast a glance to his side, contemplating his father's frequent remarks about his significant gap compared to Roland. Though Roland professed indifference, he had nonetheless dispatched Green to a nearby territory. Everyone, including Green, recognized this as a subtle demotion, yet Green remained unfazed. Roland had conferred upon him considerable renown, which mattered more to Green than power. He valued the opinions of others above all. Some even referred to him as the Light of the Griffin, for he had saved the lives of those farmers, an accolade he rightfully deserved. However, Baron discerned Roland's adeptness. He possessed an uncanny ability to satisfy all parties involved. Green was content, having garnered immense prestige, while Baron relished his promotion to chief instructor, entering the inner circle. The noble allies assisting them were equally pleased, having received news of Roland's intent to establish a port, promising lucrative trade across the narrow sea, thus ensuring a greater share of gold dragons for the merchant guild. Moreover, his father was satisfied, as he now held the title of the first border earl of Storm's Edge, with the former revenues of the Carlin family now redirected to the Shivan family. The only discontent arose from his adversaries, the Carlin family, who had only recently dealt with their affiliates, having been a topic of much speculation since 3 days prior. The commotion had drawn the curiosity of many, and those who returned spoke in hushed tones, spurring even more onlookers to satisfy their intrigue. The condemned were lined up like saplings, nailed to wooden boards. The earth stained crimson. Some, unable to endure the torment, had taken their own lives, while others, deprived of such an opportunity, languished on the boards, barely clinging to life. Baron had glimpsed the scene, but upon his return, he adopted a more serious demeanor. "My lord," Baron inquired, his heart heavy with trepidation, "do you not fear the Iron Throne's ire for such actions?" "Oh, are you referring to the Carlin family affair?" Roland replied. "A life for a life, how fair it is. They have taken so many of my farmers. Am I not allowed to exact a measure of retribution?" Baron suppressed a hollow laugh, inwardly countering. "But that is over 1,000 lives. I have just heard some rather disrespectful remarks from the merchants regarding your lordship. Pray, share these remarks with me." Roland inquired with genuine curiosity. "They claim that the bloodshed you have caused could raise the waters of the Wind Fury River by several inches. And some allege you take pleasure in converting the living into scarecrows." Baron endeavored to present the more palatable observations. "Your lordship's renown has spread across the 7 kingdoms. Beggars along the Dornish border would rather sleep in the mountains than enter the now desolate Nightingale City, for the Griffin banner flies above its gates." Roland chuckled softly, choosing not to respond, for this was precisely the outcome he desired. They rode gracefully along the stone-paved streets, the rhythmic sound of their horses' hooves echoing through the air. The village here is situated not far from Eagle's Nest Fortress, flanked by rudimentary wooden dwellings, occasionally punctuated by a more imposing structure of brick and stone. A retainer, armed with a spear, paused at the corner, and Roland inquired softly, "Is this the place?" "Indeed," the retainer affirmed. Dismounting, he approached the nearby house and gently knocked on the door a few times. After a considerable wait, the door creaked open, and Baron and Roland stealthily led their horses inside, the door closing swiftly behind them. The gatekeeper uttered not a word, silently taking the horses away. The 2 unexpected guests did not venture into the main house, but instead slipped through an inconspicuous side door into the backyard. Before them stood an aged brick building, from the easternmost room of which a faint glow of firelight emanated. They pushed open the door and entered. A simple wooden bed was positioned against the wall, and on the table by the window rested a dim oil lamp. An elderly scholar was diligently toiling with a weapon in his hands. Upon hearing their entrance, he glanced back and, upon discerning their attire, smiled warmly. "Gentlemen, may I finish tidying up this little contraption?" Roland gestured for him to continue, and the scholar returned to his task. After a while, he set down the weapon and rose to pour a glass of wine for each guest. "How is it?" Roland asked. "Mission accomplished," the scholar replied, lifting the dark cloth covering what Roland had assumed was a bed. Before him lay a contraption approximately 2 meters long and half a meter wide, known in the West as a ballista. The scholar's design featured a sturdy framework, with the main beam resting atop supports. On either side of the front end were 2 torsion spring units, each driving a bow arm, whose ends were connected to a bowstring, with a woven net bag designed to hold the projectiles at its center. The top side of the beam bore a dovetail groove, and a sliding block with a long guide rail could traverse this groove back and forth, equipped with a meticulous firing mechanism at its rear. "Remarkable," Roland exclaimed, surveying the weapon. "Has the range been measured?" "My lord, I estimate it can penetrate anything within 500 meters and cause effective harm up to 1,000 meters. The scholar replied with a hint of pride, observing Roland's excitement. Baron, however, stood by with a note of concern. He had heard of such devices, but they were strictly prohibited by the Seven Kingdoms. Chapter 20. The ballista and wildfire in Eagle's Nest Fortress. Baron was familiar with crossbows, but had never seen one of this magnitude. This contraption was explicitly banned by the Targaryens throughout the Seven Kingdoms, reserved solely for the nobility, inaccessible to common folk. The finely crafted crossbow required specialized tools for the drawing mechanism, and its bolts could even pierce thick metal armor. The origins of this formidable ranged weapon remain a mystery, but since its inception, the Targaryens have relentlessly sought to suppress its use, ruthlessly quelling any who dared to defy the prohibition. The reasons behind the prohibition of crossbows are not particularly complex. This weapon has nearly revolutionized the entire paradigm of warfare across the continent of Westeros. With minimal training, even an untrained individual can effortlessly slay a knight who has dedicated years to honing their skills. This has obliterated the once insurmountable chasm between nobles and commoners. And even the very existence of Targaryen dragons has been severely challenged. They must have contemplated that if the crossbow were larger, a dragon could be wounded, if not killed, a prospect they could not abide. At a Targaryen gathering, an unprecedented display of unwavering support from the nobility for the royal decree emerged, demanding the ban on crossbows and the execution of anyone daring enough to wield one. Even the church publicly declared that allowing the hands of the lowly to be stained with the blood of heroes was an affront intolerable to the Seven. With the church's endorsement, the Targaryens found themselves fortified, garnering a righteous cause in the eyes of the faithful. Soon, crossbows nearly vanished from the human realm, though whispers suggested that a few farmers in border villages still clandestinely hoarded a scant number to defend against ruthless bandits. Beyond this, only the nobility would dare to collect them. The room was dimly lit. A gentle warmth in the breeze accompanied their slow passage. "Do I make you uncomfortable?" Roland inquired with a smile. "Perhaps you truly require a charming companion to dance with or share a drink, rather than languishing with a dull fellow like me all day." "I do not leave empty-handed," Baron replied. "I am merely a bit curious," Roland observed. "You must not have encountered such weaponry. You cannot fathom its potency." Roland understood Baron's inquisitiveness regarding the crossbow, for it had not yet been tested in the crucible of large-scale warfare, and thus its effectiveness remained largely unknown to the masses. Yet he was acutely aware. "Then I shall await your insights. Scholar, enlighten me. How long does it take to fabricate one of these devices?" Roland's attention shifted to the crossbow, his fingers caressing its form. The crossbow itself was not extraordinary. One could easily find someone to replicate it for mass production. But the siege crossbow was another matter entirely. Roland recognized that this weapon could serve both as a formidable city defense and a dragon-slaying tool, necessitating a substantial stockpile to grant him peace of mind. Roland bore no enmity towards Daenerys Targaryen, who sought to reclaim her throne. Yet he could not abide allowing others to dictate his fate. Given the presence of dragons, it was prudent to exercise caution. To provoke Daenerys in the future, Roland would only arrange for a limited number of siege crossbows, with the remainder secured tightly within the confines of the eyrie. "My lord Roland," the scholar said, pursing his lips and stroking his chin, "I labored for 2 months to craft this device. If all goes well, I could produce 2 within a month." "Not sufficient," Roland interjected, waving his hand in a dismissive manner. "You must procure whatever is necessary. People, funds, expand production capabilities to the fullest extent." Roland's intentions regarding the siege crossbow extended beyond merely countering dragons. It also wielded considerable power on the battlefield. It could breach enemy lines, granting cavalry enhanced maneuverability, and serve as a countermeasure against opposing cavalry charges. The scholar hesitated for a moment before nodding in agreement. As he spoke, he escorted Roland and his entourage to their rooms, his lips curling in a derisive sneer that was far more unsettling than his earlier uncertainty. Once Roland departed, the scholar locked the door with a casual flick of his wrist, cursing under his breath as he moved slowly and painfully. The servant followed closely, having served the scholar for many years, and thus felt at liberty to inquire about any matter. "Do you believe this weapon will prove effective? Is Lord Roland truly so confident?" The scholar remarked on Roland's peculiar temperament. When faced with adversity, he endures like a marching cleric, humble as a sheep, and sweet as honey. It is indeed rare to find a kinder soul. Yet, once he feels invincible, his arrogance and cruelty surpass all others. Their hearts are evidently fashioned from stone by the Seven. "Are you referring to the fate of Briskelin?" The servant interjected in a hushed tone. "I have encountered many nobles, and often witness the haughty ones grant clemency to their vanquished foes. They often tell their peers that trampling a defeated enemy does little to enhance their reputation. Clearly, releasing them could yield a substantial ransom in golden dragons. But Connington is not among those who would act thus. Recently, when people learned I was a servant of the scholar working for Roland, those nearby ruffians treated me with unexpected respect. Perhaps that was his intention? The scholar mused, either to the servant or himself. Moreover, I have heard that Roland has sought the wisdom of the Alchemists' Guild with generous offers. Does Lord Roland desire wildfire? The servant exclaimed, taken aback. For Robert Baratheon harbored a deep disdain for such charlatans. From crossbows to wildfire. The scholar understood that wildfire was a highly flammable liquid capable of burning for an extended duration. Once ignited, it would consume all in its path, penetrating clothing, wood, leather, and even steel, igniting them all. Even floating on water, wildfire could burn, a characteristic that rendered it an ideal weapon of war. Although alchemists occasionally used it to demonstrate their prowess. Ambitious indeed, he discerned the servant's meaning, connecting the dots between the crossbow and the search for wildfire from the Alchemists' Guild. Realizing that Connington was actively preparing for war. In the stormlands, where there were no enemies to contend with, whom could Connington possibly be at odds with? Perhaps the Baratheons? The scholar pondered, noting Roland's utter disregard for how the Baratheons might react, even embracing the Alchemists' Guild, which the king abhorred. Robert's aversion to the guild was well-founded. It was during the reign of Aerys II that wildfire was employed against traitors, murderers, and conspirators, including the execution of Eddard Stark's father, Rickard. During Robert's reign, the guild faced oppression, and now it had dwindled to a mere shadow of its former self, consisting of only a few elders and apprentices.